Alright, let's go back to the H.W. Bush years. In 1992, Cartoon Network released, and what seems like a basic concept now was a luxury at debut. Previously, cartoons only aired on dedicated TV blocks, but with a dedicated TV channel, the novelty of Saturday morning cartoons was lost. Nickelodeon and Disney Channel existed prior, but they never only aired cartoons for appeal of their own target demographics, because that would be expensive. What was clearly an expensive business experiment created a specialty that completely paid off. Now, of course, they did rerun live-action kids movies, but that was a pleasant weekly movie night. Like, I'd always watch one of the Wimpy Kid movies if it was being reran on there. Also, live-action hybrids, like Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties, stuff like that would air a lot too. So, cartoonish enough and relevant to the target demographic. There have also been some instances of puppetry in the programming, like Big Bag and Pillywag's Mansion, a pilot I remember being disappointed that it never got picked up. And puppets are close enough to cartoons, right? But regardless, by the time Cartoon Network had lost its novelty of only airing cartoons, they decided to act more like their competitors, Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. Both networks also being known for their sitcoms of varying qualities on top of their signature animated series, which eventually led to a programming block called CN Real. Real implying live action because of the immediate contradiction of live action being aired on Cartoon Network. This contradiction being an immediate red flag. And CN Real is right because it's a real pile of shit.
Oh shit, it's Bill Cosby!
Say, look at this. I've been cleaning out my nest, and I found an old book of my poetry.
You're watching Cartoon Network.
The CN Real block would begin in 2009, but what influenced an entire block? That's dedication. Surely there had to be an influence. Well, a TV movie titled Reanimated in 2006. The movie is an animation live-action hybrid, basically Roger Rabbit, but starring characters that nobody gives a f*** about on a shoestring budget. Donald, it's not the 40s anymore, so cartoon's enough, right? This is also sort of comparable to Lizzie McGuire, which, despite only airing for 2 seasons from 2001 to 04 with one movie in 2003, it's one of the most beloved children's sitcoms of its era.
Favorite 3 white people?
Hilary Duff.
Okay, why Hillary?
Because she's from Lizzie McGuire.
One of the main gimmicks being that Lizzie would appear as a cartoon mid-live-action scenario. This may have been influential to its competitor, Cartoon Network. None of the cartoon characters in the movie are licensed, and it's an entirely original cast. But this is a Cartoon Network movie, and yeah, there might have been copyright complications, but why not include other Cartoon Network characters? It being a celebration of Cartoon Network's history up to that point could have been a main selling point if they put the money in. I mean, like, Roger Rabbit is the standard here, and that had like every notable cartoon character up to that point, except for Awful Be Bad, sadly. The cartoon members of the main cast are supposed to be like vintage cartoon characters that have resonated with families for generations, but they look straight out of 2006. Like, they look like they're gonna slit their wrist with an Invader Zim hoodie on later. Like, animated Lizzie McGuire actually looks more vintage and is typically more well inserted geometrically. All the characters are also lame as shit. And it makes sense for them narratively to be Disney allegories, but there is zero imagination here. Golly Gopher is Mickey Mouse, but a gopher. You may recognize Golly from the Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends TV movie Good Will Hunting, in which he makes a cameo. Speaking of Foster's Home, the pilot was a 66-minute special House of Blues that was later redistributed into 3 22-minute parts. So as we'll see later, Foster's may have additionally been influential to the creation of Out of Jimmy's Head. Anyway, back to the characters. Dolly Gopher is Minnie Mouse, but a gopher. Tux the Penguin is Donald Duck, but a penguin and a bad comedian. Croco is Goofy, but a crocodile. Prickles and Pickles are Tom and Jerry, but a pickle and a porcupine. Pickles looks like a John K. character. Bro think he Pickle. Milt Appleday is also the stand-in for Walt Disney, even dying from eating paint instead of cigarettes. So anyway, our protagonist Jimmy lives in a world that is fairly cartoonish, not really allowing a contrast between the ways cartoons and humans act, and his dad is the principal and a possible Dan Schneider.
It's me, Robin!
His mom is an astronaut and his sister is an alien because wacky. He also has a minority best friend and love interest girl because 2006. At Bootleg Disney World, they dick off and meet Flo from Progressive. And part of the main plot is based on the conspiracy / urban legend, whatever, that Walt Disney was chronologically preserved in liquid nitrogen vapor chamber so he could come back to life when technology got good enough to reverse death. And his actual frozen corpse is under Cinderella's castle or the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Disneyland Cali. It's just a dumb thing that you say to your child on a Disneyland vacation. And this dumb conspiracy bullshit is actually canon in a Disney parody universe, which is actually pretty funny and a clever niche. It's just odd for Cartoon Network standards and subverts your expectations. Too bad that's literally the only funny thing about this movie. But Jimmy gets hit by a train at Bootleg Disney World. And as a result of the injury, he needs a brain transplant, so they just take Walt Disney's brain. The antagonist being bootleg Walt Disney's son, Sonny Appleday, and he's somewhat memorable as a purposely ridiculously hammy villain.
Could you pass your brain?
What?
What? I'm in gravy.
This at a budget, he'd probably be played by Tim Curry. And as a result, he hallucinates the various Disney allegories. The characters themselves are invisible, but have real-world consequences. So Jimmy is basically schizophrenic. The animated characters are lazily animated into shots. There is often zero attempt at perspective. The lack of shadows in lots of instances is distracting as well. Not all shots, but lots of shots are either close-ups or shot reverse shots of the animated characters. There's not a lot of that precision that they clearly put into developing Roger Rabbit. When I was like 7, I actually remember watching The Amazing World of Gumball's series premiere on May 3rd, 2011, and being amazed how it sparingly incorporated live action for its backgrounds. Gumball came out later, has no live-action human reoccurring characters besides Sussy, and is available in better quality, obviously, but it's so much better polished and precise. You can tell that they took all the background photos, which are very well lit at super precise angles, and photoshopped convincingly to be cleaner. This is Roger Rabbit level precision, even if it's not technically the same thing. With Reanimated's animation production value, there's nothing to be amazed by. Jimmy has to deal with the consequences of seeing cartoons, and the child is forced to be the CEO of Bootleg Disney. Golly, driven by greed, is sort of a twist villain, manipulating Jimmy throughout. His responsibilities conflicting with his family and friend relationships, including Girl, because 2006. Shenanigans ensue, and it sucks hard. It's not like the company here was inexperienced with animation. It's a Cartoon Network movie. Like, you'd at least expect the cartoon half to be good. This movie sort of ends on a cliffhanger of will they, won't they with Girl, and Reanimated became the highest rated original movie in Cartoon Network's history. Not that there was much competition. Most Cartoon Network movies are based off their shows or other IPs, very few exceptions, but without a proper series, Reanimated was a hit, so it spawned a TV show sequel rather than a movie sequel. But after Reanimated, Cartoon Network started making live-action remakes of their shows as well, with Ben 10 Race Against Time and its sequel Alien Swarm and Scooby-Doo The Mystery Begins and Curse of the Lake Monster. Out of Jimmy's Head was the sequel series to Reanimated. I swear, I saw it once at like my great-grandmother's house or something and thought it was kinda neat that it had cartoons in live action, which is a novelty concept when you're first exposed to it as a child. I didn't love it or anything. Now, of course, the combination gimmick is nearly as old as cartoons as early as 1925. But maybe Reanimated was my generation's Space Jam. But Out of Jimmy's Head would feature the main lead, Dominic Janes, as Jimmy, but minority best friend and Girl would be recast. They might have changed races, but they're still minorities. The kids will never know. Changing races is just part of puberty, I guess. However, the characters' designs are upgraded, and their geometry and proportions make the illusion of being vintage characters more convincing. They look less 2006-ish. Some of the random background cartoon characters also having more rubber hose-ish designs. Although the animation itself isn't much of an upgrade. The lack of perspective and shadows on lots of instances not helping either. The first episode features a recap of Reanimated.
Hey, yo, the pizza here. Oh,
The direction is a little less of a live-action cartoon and more of a slice-of-life show with the twist of seeing cartoons characters. So the hammy meter is cranked down a little bit, which does improve the contrast. The dad and villain Sonny Appleday still remain over the top, Appleday's motivation of trying to steal Jimmy's brain being continued. The conflicts of the show are generic cliche crap. Oh boy, a talent show, ghosts, being sick, a bully, roller skating, making a homemade movie. Checks off all the boxes on the generic kids sitcom plots list. The bootleg Disney ensemble is fairly underutilized here, possibly just trying to bank off the children that missed Lizzie McGuire. Although it's not like quite Fred the Show bad or anything, the show bombed, it's nothing special, and the gimmick wore off to its audience of children. In fact, the show was lost media from 2008 to October of 2023. The show had one DVD release of only 3 22-minute episodes. And you gotta understand, the internet was still newer, but pretty prominent by 2007. Most shows that air on mainstream television post-internet don't go missing. The internet is the greatest thing to ever happen to media preservation, even if it's not legal a lot of the time. Thanks, Al Gore. Like, this went missing somehow. That is how poorly received it was. But in October of 2023, somebody found old recordings that they happened to have when the show was being aired, coincidentally having the remaining episodes. So Jimmy and his cartoon hallucinations didn't last long. Reanimated might have only been successful because it wasn't a high bar, but it was half cartoon. Disney and Nickelodeon still had the advantage of live-action sitcoms. So in 2009, they abandoned Jimmy and Golly and Friends and officially started the CN Real TV block on June 17th, 2009.
This is a visual aid. This is our Cartoon Network programming visual aid. The white represents the cartoons we show most every night. And this represents CN Real on Wednesday nights.
Read from sheets. I am Sofa King.
Sofa King.
One of the executives that is often riddled for its conception was Stuart Snyder, who was the president of Cartoon Network from 2007 to 2014. He became president after Jim Staples resigned as a result of the Aqua Teen Hunger Force : movie film for theaters marketing controversy.
Dude, check the news. It doesn't matter what channel.
Promote a movie coming out in May based on an animated series on the Cartoon Network called Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
This involved hanging LED lights of character in which citizens of the city of Boston, Massachusetts interpreted as a terrorist threat, as this was a time of the war on terror progressing in a post-9/11 society. Snyder is often blamed for CN Real a lot online, but the network in general was clearly heading in the direction of diversifying the lineup with live action. So although he absolutely approved of this, to say it was entirely his fault was a bit of a stretch.
I am Sofa King retard. You say funny thing.
Real kids doing real stuff in real situations.
CN Real was marketed with the main emphasis on subverting your expectations. It's actually similar to when MTV stopped airing music content in 2010, trying to pass off the rather oxymoronic change as cool and subversive. MTV is so dead that if you just look at their schedule, there's a good chance they're just airing the same show nearly all day. So over the course of 2009, 5 shows were added to the Cartoon Network Real lineup. Not a single new cartoon released in 2009. Stuff like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, codenamed Kids Next Door, and Chowder were still airing new episodes, wrapping up, or being reran. At the time, there was still cartoons, but no new original animated series throughout the entirety of 2009. These shows would syndicate concurrently, but would not all release at once. I'll go roughly in release order, sources are inconsistent.
And 8 teams brave the wilderness.
I'm not doing things to punish them, just to prepare them for survival.
On Survive This.
Survive This was just a carbon copy of Survivor, but PG, I guess, that Cartoon Network syndicated but did not make. There was no reason to watch this over cult phenomenon Total Drama, which started airing on Cartoon Network in 2007 as a parody of this genre / Survivor. And I am super nostalgic for like the first 4-ish seasons of the show. The main appeal of it was its edge, and parents assume, oh, it's on Cartoon Network, there possibly couldn't be anything potentially inappropriate here, but it refuses to die because it was the one show that had censored nudity and curse words, which were toned down like after season 3, but what would you rather watch as a kid? An edgy animated parody of Survivor, or a ripoff of it? The show only had 26 episodes in total, but only 10 were ever aired on Cartoon Network. I guess it has teenagers as the challengers and target demographic instead of alcoholics in their mid-30s. It's available on streaming and not lost media, but I don't know why you want to watch it. It's a challenge to survive watching this show without grabbing your pop's pistol out your nightstand.
I mean no harm, spirits. You just touched my butt.
Next was The Other Siders. This was a ghost hunting show for children, like Paranormal Home Inspectors on Cartoon Network. Most of these types of shows are like, our daughter died in this house. Oh, this is haunted. So these shows are just dicking around, pretending to be serious in random locations suspected to be haunted. Oh no, the room is dark. Like, what child would watch these shows? These are for, like, grandparents that watch History Channel. It's a fake ghost show like Ghost Hunters, which is an entire genre of bad reality show. But this has, like, no speck of violence or anything, because it's for kids. So they can't even be, like, cool with mythology or anything. Not much to be frightened over if there's nothing horrifying allegedly happening is described. I guess it had a Disney Channel-esque lineup of teenage hosts instead of a bunch of 40-year-olds screaming over fake shit in the dark, so it's a little less embarrassing to star in.
Oh no, the place got abandoned. It's empty with some things because it's an abandoned location. Oh my god, guys, there's no lights. It's abandoned. It's green. It has X-ray vision. The green is scary because ghosts are green. I'm gonna piss myself out of fear. Oh my god.
Apparently, around its air date, it was available digitally on iTunes, but nobody bought that shit. It was pulled sometime after. The show went missing and was lost media until about 2016. In 2021, one of the main archive YouTube channels possibly got a copyright strike because of it, but the other episodes are still available, but harder to find. So there's a good chance Cartoon Network or its creator or something wants this hidden, and that's absolutely justifiable because this is embarrassing. But if you make a ghost show involving screaming over fake in the dark for 22 minutes, you deserve to get canceled.
And if they can fight the G's, they could win a few on Brain Rush.
Brain Rush was a combination of Jeopardy and roller coasters because roller coasters, I guess. It's a trivia show first, but a roller coaster show secondly. I expected this to be like about the making of roller coasters or something, but how could you possibly be here for trivia? It's just stupid niches that nobody would know. And it's not like watching other people ride roller coasters is fun. The series was shot at Knott's Berry Farm theme park in Cali, and I'm not from Cali, but I've never heard of that. I guess Disneyland or Universal Studios wasn't in the budget. It only aired for 6 episodes and was lost media until 2018, with the exception of episode 4, which only bits have survived of. Overall, just a pile of theme park concrete vomit.
I'm Andrew WK, and this is Destroy, Build, Destroy!
Destroy, Build, Destroy is probably the most notable CN Real show. The host, Andrew WK, was sort of the mascot of the TV block as well. He is also a somewhat notable metal musician, and I guess he was in the budget. And I have to say, he actually tried, unlike any of the other hosts on this block. Like, he's energetic enough. He gets the point of the show across. The point being blowing shit up. And I gotta say, I actually liked this show growing up mainly because you got Andrew screaming and explosion, which works great for hyper-stimulating children obsessed with violence. Dude, the Annoying Orange annual special, Kill Clips Apocalypse, I was super hyped for annually back then. Hell yeah, food death. Destroy, Build, Destroy is a game show with explosions and building random crap. And you're not here to learn for this, you just want to see fire, fire, fire. It somehow manages to make literal explosions boring and repetitive, and Andrew WK gets annoying after a while too. You know, cause he's always screaming, oh my god! Honestly, the best thing to come out of the show was its parody on the 2010 Mad animated series, which I've said before is pretty funny, but also very dated. And this is a great example of it being dated, since it's such an obscure show that was concurrently airing with the Mad cartoon series in 2010. In the parody sketch, Andrew WK shows up to Bob the Builder's workyard, and he even gets to voice his insert as he murders Bobby's group of sentient construction vehicles. It got 4 seasons, the most of any, and it's not lost media, so I think it's safe to say it was easily the best show on the block, and it's a game show that makes explosions boring, starring a man-child screaming.
Now on my show, Bobby Says, I do my best to keep you from looking like a fool. Yeah.
Bobby Says is an extreme sports clip show starring Bobby J. Thompson, who you may know as Stanley from That's So Raven.
Stanley, what's wrong?
Corey got a bone hand.
He also became a SoundCloud rapper, because of course he did. And for the white people watching, he was also on Ellen in 2004. So he got his own show on Cartoon Network, but it wasn't a celebrity endorsement cartoon. He sees skateboarding and makes epic comments. The show was lost media until 2017, where 1 of 6 episodes, the pilot featuring Tony Hawk because it's 2009 and tech decks were all the rage.
Yeah! Can you do that, Tony?
Seriously? New circuit boards.
They'll let you skate even better than Tony Hawk.
Hey!
And the Tony Hawk pilot is the only available episode, thanks to a TV recording of the series premiere. Bobby says nothing funny in the one available episode.
Our show, dude, what would happen? And we dream of the craziest situations ever.
Dude, what would happen? I am also nostalgic for. I remember it being on before shows I actually wanted to watch, like Mad Regular Show and Adventure Time, so I'd suffer through it if it meant there was nothing else good on Nick or Disney. I remembered it being more of a PG Jackass, but upon revisiting it, it's a Mythbusters ripoff hosted by obnoxious dude bros. The comedy of the show is not for injury like Jackass, but for random experiment, bruh. It's just Mythbusters douchebag edition with less of a budget. They're not really investigating scientific myths, they're just doing dumb shit and nothing interesting or funny happens.
And the dudes, welcome back to the show.
Yeah!
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 I remember the network trying to hype up the dudes, the main trio, and sort of also mascots of CN Real, but I actually liked Andrew WK as a kid. He had 4 seasons, but I never gave a about the dudes. There's a bunch of fake scripted segments about them coming up with ideas instead of just explaining the ideas, because no, we just have to have lore to the experiments because we're just so raw, dude. The word dude is constantly incorporated. Dude, what would happen if this show became lost media? Well, I couldn't watch it, but sadly it isn't lost media and every episode is available. Bruh, it got 3 seasons. The CN Real block would officially end on May 28, 2010, less than a year in, the decision to pull the plug possibly being influenced by the successful premiere of Adventure Time on April 5th, 2010, on top of the underperformance of the other shows. Regular Show would also premiere in September of that year, another big dog of the era.
What are you?
Looks like a bucket of diarrhea.
However, Dude, What Would Happen and Destroy Build Destroy would still air new episodes, just not on a dedicated programming block. And Cartoon Network hadn't lost faith in not making cartoons yet.
Are y'all ready to get this party started? It's family versus family in the most outrageous competition. Where you either make it.
Hole in the Wall was a game show that I actually really enjoyed as a kid, going as far to watch it on Netflix. It is a British-American version of a Japanese game show titled Brain Wall, but most people over there call it Human Tetris. It originally aired on Fox, but Cartoon Network picked up the series, allowing it to continue, as it is pretty slapstick-oriented and a child could enjoy it, and I certainly did. Under a short time period, teams have to assume positions that will fulfill the hole in the wall. If they cannot, they will be pushed into the water below them. And you know what? It's a fine family game show. It's not really my cup of tea. It's extremely out of place for Cartoon Network. but this one's watchable, probably because Cartoon Network didn't conceive it. On Cartoon Network, it bombed once again. Season 3 was produced and released on home media, but it was never aired on television because they didn't even bother with what they greenlit. Similar to The Problem Solvers Season 2.
I don't know, bro. There's something about that guy over there that just doesn't sit right with me.
Perhaps it is because of the way that he's sitting. On his tail?
He's charging! He's charging!
Level Up. New episodes, Tuesdays at 8, 7 Central, only on Cartoon Network.
Okay, yeah, that title is a red flag. A gamer show for gamers. Because that's what this network needed. It had a pilot movie like Foster's, although it was never distributed as an extended or multi-part episode. Level Up is both the title of movie and the sequel series, because that's not confusing. I call this genre gamer juice, like bug juice, but trying to bank off of children with the inclusion of video game culture in media. I remember my aunt got me this book called Gamer Army for Christmas one year, and sadly, I'm not hardcore enough of a gamer to read it, so I never did. I was also never the kid that wore those How to Spot a Gamer shirts in 2010. You see, the shirt is funny, but it implies nothing but gaming. Oh yeah, committing murder against your sibling. Because gaming. Dude, these things were all over my elementary school. Every boy had one of those but me. Dude, senior year of high school, I flipped off the class portrait, and you know what? The kid in the Minecraft shirt right next to me snitched. So all the characters are hardcore gamers, and they play a bootleg Warcraft, and their parents are haters. They're lame haters and not epic gamers. Stupid Lois Griffin-ass mother making me do homework. One of the dads is Obama, and he's like, son, do not play video games. They are gay and lame. Thank you. God bless America. The Warcraft CG is bad on purpose, obviously, but Cartoon Network probably thought they were being slick by creating something in live action with minimal CG. But oh no, creatures jump out the game, and out of the fear of being held accountable, they have to game super epically and fight monsters IRL. The monsters don't even look like the graphics, which could have been an interesting stylistic decision and would have cut costs like Gwimbly.
Oh, I swear to God, if I had my Gwimbly gun on me right now!
Like, this feels extremely 2003 for 2011, although it's not quite as emo as Reanimated. The fights are incredibly lame CG shot, reverse shot. If the action sequences actually had a budget, it could have been the one redeeming quality. So they go to meet the creator, who is crazy and lives in a big titty mansion, a cliche for gamer juice media. The crew randomly decides to break up, not even through like a cliche third act breakup. We just have to spend extra time reassembling the gamer army, you know, because it's desperate to get to the 67-minute mark and then defeat the villain of the game. I guess the movie was successful, so we gotta give it a show a year later. Much like Out of Jimmy's Head, the full show basically killing the franchise because it sucks even harder and the gimmick wore off on its audience. Same thing, just with slight serialization and more high school drama. Man, it's almost like this should have been a cartoon, not just because it was on Cartoon Network, but because none of the things that happened in this franchise would be easy to make convincingly in live action. To have good production value, it could have been cheaper as a cartoon.
Bow to the mayor of space!
Nacho tortilla hose! Laser high five! Cheat sheet tacos!
Another cheat sheet?
Oh!
Hey, what's up?
She's so pretty, and her soul is made of meat.
You look just like Taylor Lautner. Incredible Crew! The all-new series premieres Thursday, January 24th at 8, 7 Central.
Only on Cartoon Network.
Alright, so Incredible Crew I only saw once, but I hated it, and I can still remember the specific episode I saw. It was Season 1, Episode 9, Face Jeans. Incredible Crew is a children's variety sketch comedy series. The Incredible Crew themselves often being a part of scenarios with absurd devices and or challenges. The series was created by comedian, actor, and rapper Nick Cannon, who you may know for his short-lived self-titled sitcom on Nickelodeon and one of the main comedians on Nickelodeon's All That on later seasons. He also hosted the failed Teen Nick Halo Awards for 2 years. So Cartoon Network wanted to be Nickelodeon so badly that they just got a guy from Nickelodeon and gave him a show. I guess that's better than hiring Dan Schneider. The series is also comparable to All That, and it's All That early 2010s LOL Random Humor Edition, and it's one of the worst shows I've ever seen. Now, I don't hate LOL Random Humor of the time in general, but a lot of it does not hold up.
Justin Bieber!
your skull? Yeah. Do you like to party?
Regular Show and Uncle Grandpa definitely mastered it. Like, look at the promotional images. Dog, ranch dressing, mop, tacos. Like, this screams 2012 for all the wrong reasons. And much like the dudes, they tried to hype up the Incredible Crew as, like, pop culture icons we're supposed to care about. Since it was a variety show, segments would be aired during commercial breaks for advertising, and that drove me crazy because I came here to watch Clarence, not this garbage. Since it was created by a rapper, musical sketches were also incorporated. Most sketches can be divided into two categories. LOL random gross out parody infomercial, or LOL random stupid song that isn't funny. I can recall the running errands with my mom song segment being aired a lot during the commercials, and that drove me crazy because it's not funny.
We're stopping by the bank. At the ATM, transaction was sweet. Mom, before you go, don't forget your receipt.
I'll get it, he's boasting about his mother's responsibilities instead of coke and hookers. Like, just read the episode titles. They describe every problem perfectly. Lunch boxing, pancake genie, farting grandpa, magical video game controller, candy deodorant, remote control broccoli. It's lazy random humor over and over and over again. So, I've already talked about the show and the Annoying Orange in general, so I'll keep it brief. If you don't know what that is, you're not old enough to be watching my channel, but you are old enough to watch Annoying Orange's videos after 2014 or so.
Oh my gosh, I have to go to the bathroom so bad. Skibbity, skibbity,
But I do see some people count it as one of their attempts at live-action shows since it is not technically a cartoon. It is a synchrovox show, a combination of video and photographs. Synchrovoxing refers to the action of superimposing human movement onto objects.
Oh, that paddlefoot. He funny city dog. He thinks totem pole alive.
Although I'd consider this far more of a cashing in on YouTuber show and less of a cost-cutting method of competing with Nickelodeon and Disney Channel show. Now, back in the day, Fred and Annoying Orange actually did 2 crossovers, excluding reuses of footage, one of which, Fred versus the Annoying Orange, sort of made them canonical rivals. Fred Figglehorn, whom I've also talked about in extensive detail, got 3 movies and a show from Nickelodeon. So Cartoon Network figured, why not do the same thing, but with Annoying Orange, meaning that the canonical rivals legitimately became television rivals. The series, The High Fructose Adventures of the Annoying Orange, would be airing the same summer of 2012 as Fred the Movie 3, Camp Fred, and Fred the Show. And if you know my lore, you know that I've mentioned countless times that I had a very unhinged obsession with the Annoying Orange from about late 2011 to mid-2015. Most people find Annoying Orange to be unintentionally disturbing, but because these images were burned into my brain at such a young age, they legitimately look pleasant to my eyes. I legit have to remind myself that the character designs are David Lynch trickery in some people's books, and I'm not making this up. And as somebody whose visual perception of the characters is screwed up because of my obsession in years when my brain was developing, I even hated this show as a kid. And I still watched Annoying Orange, the web show, unironically for about 3 more years after this came out. So you'd have to f*** up exceptionally for an unhinged child fan of yours to hate it. And given that it had to be adapted into 11-minute episodes, lots of changes were made, but not for the better. The series no longer took place in Danebo's kitchen, but a grocery store named Danebo's, and had an 11-minute episodes as opposed to the 5-ish minute episodes featuring the entire ensemble prominently. Now obviously, Annoying Orange has a secondary cast. Fun fact, Grandpa Lemon and Grapefruit died originally, but were brought back in the Frankenfruit episode as a part of a Frankenstein's monster because Danebo wanted them back so badly. Although in the Annoying Orange web show, the main ensemble only appears when it's convenient for a joke. The web show additionally does not involve conflict resolution on most instances.
I already heard the news, but everybody's favorite YouTuber named Tobuscus is going to be on the Annoying Orange TV show! We know!
When the show first got announced, I assumed it would be a variety show, the same thing as the web show, just in a 22-minute format. In fact, it pissed me off that it wasn't as a kid, and I still have to agree with my criticism at that age. Another poor adaptational change was the lack of musical numbers. Annoying Orange has had a ton of song parodies and the occasional original song over the years, the music videos also serving as episodes in the chronology, some of which even include sketches like Lady Pasta. But there have been tons of other reoccurring series throughout the Annoying Orange chronology over the years, such as the various viral video spoofs, the video game parodies, trailer trashed. All of these types of videos in the lore could have been segments. Weird Al is in the Christmas special, which is one of 2 appearances, the other being on The Marshmallow Show, which was like Space Ghost but with YouTubers. And Weird Al never gets to play a piece of food despite him having songs about food. Like, why didn't he play bologna or Rocky Road ice cream? Tobuscus, whom I've also talked about in extensive detail, plays an employee at Danebo's. Tobuscus was a reoccurring guest actor on Annoying Orange, appearing on the web show 8 times. But on television, he basically got a full self-insert. What's wrong, Orange? You and your fruity friends seem kinda depressed. All the web show cast does return, but it's not like Bob Jennings, the voice of Grapefruit and creator of Zombie George Washington, is a high-profile celebrity.
Chocolate wings. Robert Abraham Lincoln is a poopy pants.
It's a terrible television show that doesn't even understand what made the web show successful. And if you want to count it as a live-action Cartoon Network show, it was the last one. Ending in 2014, the cancellation first being announced on the creator's Q&A show, Danebo Exposed.
TV show canceled.
Ah, yes, the eternal question. I have been getting this one a lot. Yes, the TV show will no longer be airing on Cartoon Network.
And thankfully for the better. Cartoon Network has never once been desperate enough to attempt live-action programming again. And generational bias aside, 2010 to like 2016 or so was definitely a renaissance for Cartoon Network, which may have not happened without this live-action downfall. Don't get me wrong, Cartoon Network is dead. It's been agreed to be dead since like 2017 or so. But hey, 2020's Cartoon Network isn't as bad as CN Real era Cartoon Network or even Nickelodeon now.
Greg Huxley versus and Spring!
After this battle, your family won't be the only thing you've lost, because your raps are worse than the entire Holocaust.
Now, I don't know about you, but growing up, I was a huge fan of what I like to call the punk-ass kid being an asshole children's story genre. I'm talking about Junie B. Jones, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Captain Underpants had elements of that, Horrible Harry, not Horrid Henry, but also that genre, Horrible Harry. Big Nate wasn't really an asshole, but he did get in trouble a lot because he was lazy, close enough. Junie B. Jones was like the first ever books with chapters I ever read, which was like a mind-blowing concept when you're in 2nd grade. And like any kid in school during the prime of No Child Left Behind, I love me some Wimpy Kid. And also, Horrid Henry. And why? Because when I had like less than 100 subscribers for 9 years straight, the show's YouTube channel would be the only thing that would show up when you'd search my name. Thanks to the algorithm, nobody could watch my Ninjago fanfictions where the camera was barely in focus. And one of the series of the punk-ass kid being an asshole genre I enjoyed was Judy Moody. Now, this wasn't like an absolute favorite, but I still read like all the books I could get my hands on at the time. Written by Megan McDonald with illustrations by Peter H. Reynolds, it was about a girl with some attitude. It would span 18 main series books, 6 books in a spin-off series about her brother Stink, 3 crossover books where Judy and Stink are center focus, and another series aimed at a younger demographic, which gave more focus to a lot of the secondary cast, spanning 26 books that I never read. Now, as a kid during the peak of my interest in the series, I would have loved to seen a movie of it, but it turns out it did have a movie. It just came out a couple years before I got into the series. So the Judy Moody movie immediately got on my watch list at the time. And when I pulled up the trailer on YouTube, I remembered the advertisements being aired on Nick and Cartoon Network a few years back and thinking it looked stupid. But a smidge older me probably got it from a local ghetto Ohioan public library or something, and you know what? 7-year-old me was correct about 11-year-old me. This movie is toad piss.
Do you have anything you want to say to women for having owned this?
I'm sorry, women.
Hey
Hi all, Scott here.
But credit is due where credit is due. It probably taught me the concept of good things having adaptations, so I guess I learned something. Now, in terms of live-action adaptations of children's movies of the punk-ass kid genre, there is one undisputed king, the original Wimpy Kid trilogy. Lots of other adaptations of things with similar source material to Wimpy Kid started to get adaptations in the 2010s, and the Judy Moody movie was one of them. And if you haven't seen the original Wimpy Kid trilogy, to keep it brief since they've been talked about to death by nostalgic fan children and even this guy that looks a lot like Daniel the Demon Slayer if he didn't slay demons, they are genuinely very well-made children's movies. Some of the best of its kind, actually.
Hey! What the?
You guys got something you want to tell me?
No?
Yes, there's some early 2010s random humor that's a little dated.
Wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy.
And some of the gross out is a little cringe-worthy, but besides that, they're actually worth going out of your way to watch as an adult without children, not just for nostalgia value. And if you're my age and never somehow saw them, you should. They're not something you'd expect to hold up, but they completely do. Let's briefly go over some of the other movies trying to cash in on the Wimpy Kid movies. Get it? Because there's a little bit too much of Zachary Gordon in his underwear? 5 stars. Dan Schneider approved. And I'm not saying that these books are ripping off Wimpy Kid, some of them debuting before actually, but adaptations were clearly conceived to bank off of Wimpy Kid's fellow adaptational success. Another book series I loved growing up was Timmy Failure, and it got a Disney Plus live-action adaptation in 2020. Also by Disney, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. I remember seeing trailers for and thinking like, what the f***? They're putting Disney Channel movies in theaters now? And props to 10-year-old me, because that's exactly what this shit looks like. Not to be confused with the animated TV movie from 1990.
I think I'll move to Australia.
Horrid Henry the movie, because the show is so beloved. I never read Dear Dumb Diary growing up because I'm now just realizing the only books with girl protagonist I read were punk-ass tomboys with the exception of Cam Jansen. And despite having a diary format, it actually came out the same year as the original Wimpy Kid 2004 webcomics, the first proper book not releasing until 2007. So that was simply a coincidence in the journal entry standard of children's storytelling that was forming in the mid to late 2000s. In fact, it actually looks a lot more like Captain Underpants, at least formatting-wise, which came out in 97, more than Wimpy Kid, and it was also written by a dude, Jim Benton. Meaning that I probably would have actually liked this series growing up. I'll take the L for not even picking up one of these. It also had an adaptation of this genre. I mean, like, the source material similar name got it greenlit alone. Jessica Darling's It List, yuck. And if we're talking actual Wimpy Kid ripoffs, there's a ton of those too, and these were the author's fault. I never read them, but 2009's Dork Diaries was somewhat well-liked for something clearly way too similar. I mean, like, it got 16 books. That has to be doing something right? I mean, like, you could yassify anything and a white would still love it. They say not to judge a book by its cover, but just look at it. Look at it! It's like the irate gamer or dinosaur with 42 heads. Like, yeah, it's there, but it's not the actual AVGN or Pan Pizza, so there's no reason to watch it, or at least I think. You know, Pan Pizza, the internet's John Lennon because he has a Yoko Ono. Apparently, there was a movie adaptation that Lionsgate threw in the garbage. The source material was that unoriginal. Now, I'm not gonna say what race, what people the author of Dork Diaries is. It was a black author who stole from Jeff Kinney. And how could we forget the countless Minecraft-themed rip-off books? Okay, well, I'm not sure if they're supposed to be, like, parodies or rip-offs, but I've never read them. But I refuse to read the diary entries of A Farting Creeper, Wimpy Steve, 8-Bit Warrior, and Minecraft Zombie, which also ties into the unofficial Minecraft books rabbit hole with such classics like Stinky Steve 4 versus The Burpinator.
Sky. It's a bird.
Like, I understand, it's the most amount of fun you can have while playing an app, but holy hell, P.T. Evans, what is the matter with you? This guy was like a grown adult and was like, yeah, I'm gonna write a book about f***ing Herobrine himself. Yeah, that's funny. That's what I should spend months of my life, even years, doing, publishing. His other series, Mine Cat, has like MS Paint art in it. Middle School Worst Years of My Life was also a series I never got into, but I did see the Wimpy Kid ripoff ass adaptation in theaters, actually, with my friend who was a huge fan of the series at the time and wanted to see it. This theater literally had from 2007 in it, by the way. This isn't a Wimpy Kid ripoff movie, but its source material has some similarities, so I thought the Big Nate show was worth mentioning. I've only seen clips and the promotional shorts, but it's been heavily criticized for being unfaithful, and holy hell, as someone who grew up with the novels and comic compilations, yeah, this looks really unfaithful.
Butt cheeks, do-da-da-do-da-do-da, butt cheeks. Butt cheeks.
5 stars, Dan Schneider approved. I'll just stick to Judy Moody's Wimpy Kid ripoff ass movie because it's the only one I'm nostalgic for both its adaptation and source material.
Somebody farted.
Say, look at this. I've been cleaning out my nest, and I found an old book of my poetry.
Exploded diaper all over the place. Exploded diaper.
The Judy Moody movie would adapt the 10th book, The Not Bummer Summer. And why the 10th? Well, merchandising reasons. It released the same year, or at least I think. Most sources say that this book came out in 2018, but I know for a fact it didn't because I saw this movie and I'd be in high school by then. So it probably got a re-release obscuring the original's release and subsequently documentation. But some sources say that it came out in 2012, meaning that it was an adaptation of the movie. I have no clue. I'm pretty sure it was produced simultaneously in 2011 with the film, because Megan McDonald herself co-wrote the film with Kathy Waugh, who wrote a bunch of PBS Kids stuff and created the series Molly of Denali. So maybe only Mrs. McDonald's can only write a film that's bad. That makes the most sense from a business standpoint. I mean, like, why start with book 10? This series is actually surprisingly more obscure than I thought, considering the quantity of books and the fact that it got an adaptation to begin with. Maybe the studio was just really stretching for ideas to cash in on Wimpy Kid. It was produced by Smokewood Entertainment and distributed by Relativity Media, which I've never heard of, although Universal did internationally distribute. So this random studio just so happened to scoop up an also random part of my childhood. I guess it was a cheap license. I can't say I've ever heard anyone else bring up this book series in public. For something with a major motion picture adaptation, book publishing info online is far and few between, assuming I'm snooping in the right places. The wiki is so empty and desperate for pages. One of the pages is characters who wear glasses. The plot is that Judy comes up with a terrorist plot, dare map, to calculate the epicness of her summer, meaning that her entire summer plan consists of her friend group convincing each other to do stupid shit. Judy setting goals for stupid shit. And like any movie of the era, there's a scene where they get out of school for the summer with emo music. But her friends have to part ways for the summer to Judy's dismay, and even worse, her parents are like, "Hey, Peanut, you want to live with a hooker for the whole summer? You're old enough, right?" And she has to be babysat by her LA crack whore aunt, who is unsurprisingly an irresponsible piece of shit. She's like having Diddy party withdrawals, kicking boys to the curb unless they look like Mick Jagger, clearly wondering how late she can terminate a pregnancy in the state.
Okay, more leverage. Hang in there.
As you can see, she's very experienced on bouncing on things. So Judy has to make it the best summer ever with her hooker/crackhead babysitter, meaning it's scene of dumb shit after dumb shit after dumb shit after dumb f***ing shit, which wouldn't matter if it was funny, but it's just dumb shit. Well, besides all the filler of her friends going away elsewhere for the summer, which takes up an eternity.
It's a circus camp. I'm gonna learn how to walk on a tightrope and...
He got gloomed and died 3 days later from exposure.
Get down! After the Peace Corps, I trekked across the Sahara, and then I went to the...
5 stars. Dan Schneider approved.
Scat. Noun. Scientific term for animal droppings, also known as poop, dung, or doo-doo.
This is clearly just an excuse to put the word poop on the screen. I hate it when kids' movies do this to, like, visually convey information. It's so desperate to be quirky that it's tacky. It's not as bad as, like, Night of the Living Fred, which does it in the worst possible way I've ever seen.
No, if I knew, I wouldn't be scared. Now would I?
And why are you so scared? He's just a teacher.
Prior to revisiting this movie, the 2 things I remembered were the throwing up scene and the poop sandwich scene. And not because I thought they were funny. The vomiting scene I also remember being in like every trailer, which is what turned me against this movie to begin with, before I got into the books. For context, the nerd character, who has glasses by the way, thanks Wiki, eats a bunch of blue and he pukes on the roller coaster and it's blue puke. Think has a subplot where he's trying to find Bigfoot and he grabs a bunch of turds from the backyards because kids just love playing with turds. And Ashley Olsen, babysitter, is hungover and puts Theodore's sticky little nuggets in the sandwich. It's funny because literal animal shit from an asshole is a sandwich ingredient. Laugh. I swear, kids movie marketing always hypes up the most obnoxious joke, and then you sit down and watch the damn thing, and you cringe even harder at it with full context. Like, why did circus afro have to be in like every Madagascar 3 trailer? Oh, it's the Smurf blue puking scene. Give it a fucking round of applause. Yeah, and that's another thing about children's movies circa No Child Left Behind. There is a ton of gross-out comedy, which is contrary to where it originated from in 90s animated series.
Did you say something about a child's behind?
Yeah, he definitely said something about a child's left behind. I heard him.
Despite the fact that, like, gross-out comedy doesn't work in PG live action, because it uses, like, actual people, it would have to be violent to be disgusting. Nobody wants to look at, like, a homicide victim for laughs and not scares. There's also, like, a third act breakup because Glasses is like, Judy, stop daring people to do stupid shit, you dumb bitch. Plus, you're a ginger, ew. There's zero attempt at the characters making up. Glasses just shows up in the next scene interrupting everything and, like, they're cool again, I guess? Like, did they just resolve the beef off screen? If you're not gonna show them makeup, why did they break up in the first place? Like in Wimpy Kid after the most emotional dialogue in human history.
Don't come by my house. We're done.
Greg eats the cheese to help Relly because he does care about him deep down, even if he was a piece of shit. Like, how do you make a third act breakup without a resolution? Not even the laziest and shittest kids movies that utilize this tired cliche are this inconfident at incorporating it. Like, how did Megan McDonald, a professional author, not realize something is missing? The one thing I can give them credit for is that they actually made a fake Night of the Living Dead parody that causes the stupid-ass third act breakup.
They have taken over the small town of Pennsylvania. Lock your doors, bolt your windows, head for the basement. And if you don't have a basement, build one.
The LA crack whore aunt, like I said, piece of shit, not disciplinary. But she could have actually allowed for Judy to realize that she could be reasonably disciplined to begin with, or on the other end of the spectrum, realize that she's probably not the most responsible person and not a good role model and should not strive to be like her at all.
But my legs get tired standing out in the parking lot handing out stale Tootsie Rolls to you little rugrats.
Of course, Judy succeeds by her own logic. I'm having the best summer ever. It's fabulous. Like, I'm not saying everything has to have a moral, but wasted potential to any capacity is wasted potential. Maybe she could have learned that it's in the way, or that some things aren't worth doing. I mean, like, I guess she does sort of learn that all the stupid shit going haywire was thrilling, but there's no realization progressively. There's very little character development. It's only in like the last 2 minutes. Magically, all of a sudden, the summer was not, bummer. Her teacher, Mr. Todd, is played by Urkel.
Girl, class 3T, you'll wanna look for me. Cause if somehow you find me, there's a prize, oh yes sirree.
If this wasn't a kid's movie, he could sing the original lyrics, if you know what I'm saying. There are a small handful of animated imagination sequences, like Doug, but it looks like a allergy medicine commercial. It's not a sparing use of multi-mediums. Again, Wimpy Kid, it had animation all throughout the film, mainly to interlude time jumps or motivations visually.
Greg Heffley, please do not say the N-word in my classroom. Hey, you. Excuse me.
Like, the books weren't graphic novels, but they did have illustrations, so there's nothing, like, super iconic to adapt, but ew. Which further asks the question, why wasn't the whole thing a cartoon? Now, not that illustrated novel in live action equals bad, Wimpy Kid is peak, but it's always cool to see an art style come to life. But a majority of this genre of movie doesn't do that because it's just cheaper to do it in live action. And when they did finally start making animated Wimpy Kid adaptations that resemble the illustration style, it looked like complete ploopy because they didn't try. It's like the Peanuts movie without any salt and pepper. Like, this movie got released in theaters, and this is the best they could do? And by the way, it was a bomb. It barely made its budget back. On the subject of visuals, they did attempt to replicate Judy's haircut in live action with the singular curl, similar to how Greg had like the 3 springs on the back of his head, similar to the portrayal of himself. In fact, most of the character designs are actually pretty well adapted in live action. There are also some commendable references to other stuff from the books I can recall, like Judy's tutor, who is also a college student, and Stink's giant jawbreaker from one of his books, and possibly even more reference I missed, as McDonald did help co-write. It being a summer story, I remember Mr. Todd being a much more prominent character in the books because of the setting, as well as Judy's classmate and rival Jessica Finch, who gets a couple appearances. Were they setting up the Judy Moody cinematic universe? Probably. The child acting isn't horrible, Judy's bipolar enough, enthusiastic and moody when necessary. Stink gets the annoying little brother with a speech impediment archetype down enough. More like Judy Moody gets a stupid-ass movie that tastes worse than herpes from an LA hooker's booty, covered in duty. This movie is clearly era-defining for all the wrong reasons. It reeks of 2000s and early 2010s kids movie everything. I think little kids might like it, but not really like chapter book, later elementary school target demographic of the source material would like it. In all its Disney Channel-ass glory, it's just too low-brow and vanilla, hence to why I wasn't a fan of this when I was in the target audience of the book series, and even as a younger kid prior, I thought it looked stupid. Like a 5-year-old might like it, but not a 9-year-old that could read the books. It completely destroys all the chances of fans liking it, and that should be a majority of the audience in mind. And I'm no child psychologist, but trust me, there's a huge lexile difference between Duck Duck Go and Junie B. Jones, and this is Junie B. Jones melted into Duck Duck Go, covered in for a quick bill, her. The cherry on top being that it's just also a Disney Channel movie in theaters. It's a bad adaptation for a demographic that doesn't exist, and not pleasant childhood memory, let me tell you that.
Alright, Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy play written by William Shakespeare, aka a dead dude from 1597, which you probably already know that, so I don't gotta tell you the plot and blah 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 famous public domain story adaptations up the ass. As early as 1908, but you may recognize the 1968 version and Romeo plus Juliet, a postmodern adaptation set in the modern day from 1996, even starring Leonardo DiCaprio before he started f***ing 25-year-olds. And keep in mind, in the original play, Romeo is 16 and Juliet is 13, so little did we know Leo is great casting. But one day, some jackass thought the pun of Romeo and Juliet was hilarious, so somehow it got made!
Say, look at this! I've been cleaning out my nest, and I found an old book of my poetry.
Cristiano, Cristiano, where far out thou, Cristiano? And I would be there.
If a shitty movie has a pun title, there's a very good chance they came up with the title before they came up with the plot. Like, why make a retelling of Romeo and Juliet with garden gnomes? Since the story's been done 1,000 times, you gotta do something new to justify its existence. But why garden gnomes? To be funny? Like, who even likes those? But I guess the pun was epic enough to get the project off the ground. I mean, like, Muppet Christmas Carol, I'd argue, is genuinely the best version of A Christmas Carol. So I think that should be the standard for retellings of public domain properties with a unique spin. In common with Muppet Carol, Romeo and Juliet also has Michael Caine in it. He was also in Cars 2, meaning that 2011 was not a good year for Michael Caine animated movies. Releasing in 2011, Romeo and Juliet made $193.9 million on a $36 million budget, meaning that it was a success only on the basis that it was relatively cheap to make. I swear, I saw part of this movie, maybe not all of it, in like a school cafeteria before Christmas break once it came out on DVD or something like that. And legitimately, the only thing I remembered is that there's this one gag where, like, a plastic fish keeps sinking to the bottom of the very tiny backyard sinkhole water thing. And it made me wish I was watching Rango, which coincidentally also had a plastic goldfish in it. Yes, both of these movies have a plastic goldfish, and I probably only realized that as a kid because I was bored out of my mind. And I'm an adult, and I'm still bored out of my mind watching this. So since it's a garden gnome retelling, the Montagues and Capulets are divided by their owners in yards in a duplex. Division is also based on the color of their hats. Segregation, oh yeah. Crime, racism. Subject, blue garden gnomes. It takes a Toy Story approach where humanoid character objects are secretly sentient in general. Because kids just love gardening decoration humor for 90 minutes. Like, aren't lawnmowers hilarious? The settings are incredibly limited, unlike Toy Story, because it's just dicking off in like the same two backyards, few exceptions. Now, given that this is a PG adaptation, the conclusion of Romeo and Juliet of being super emo in double committing suicide is excluded. I guess the original play's age gap too. Although the original suicide ending is alluded to, but does not affect our protagonist. The movie has an opening narration which just sucks itself off by being like, "Yeah, kids, this is the new cool version. We got garden gnomes." The death of Mercutio at the beginning of Act 3 in the play is somewhat alluded to with the fake-out death of Romeo instead, meaning that this character has two fake-out deaths in the span of 30 minutes. But don't worry, after the fake-out death, they have an epic dance party, two of the worst kids movie cliches in a row. But I guess it's not the most unreasonable, because I'd love to boogie down if we magically ended racism. So the plot just basically jumps from familiar story beats in whatever garden gnome race war conflicts they could come up with. Many of the secondary characters have plot equivalents and aren't technically direct adaptations. Like Juliet's nurse is replaced by a frog who is super quirky and would be played by Aquafina if this came out now. The animation is fine. Some of the little details like dust and scratches are commendable. It's confident enough for a 30 million animated movie in 2011. Humans are seen throughout the movie and their movements are incredibly awkward. It feels like motion capture was inserted, and you rarely see the human faces in a visible frame, so they might have actually done that. Some of the brief visual gags like the house address being to be or not to be are like little details are commendable, but are completely overshadowed by lame gnome jokes for all you gnome lovers.
I'm sorry about your son.
I'm sorry about your daughter.
Wait, what do you mean son and daughter? Do they One of the associated production companies was Rocket Pictures. This is Elton John's film production company, and he was a producer on this movie. Something tells me the director just wanted to hang out with him or something and wanted to dick ride his soundtrack involvement with The Lion King and Road to El Dorado. He was in Bob the Builder, Sky's the Limit. Like, he was clearly only given the role of executive producer for marketability. Two generic ballads, Hello Hello, featuring Lady Gaga, and Love Build a Garden, were written for the film, as well as a pop cover of Crocodile Rock, which John provides some backing vocals for. This is unfortunate because John made a comeback with his 2010 LP with Leon Russell, The Union. Wait, you don't know what I'm talking about. This film just oddly sucks off the fact that they got Elton John involved. Like, the soundtrack is just an Elton John greatest hits. Even some of the score consists of Elton John melodies, the main theme being an orchestral rendition of Your Song. It's an incredibly unsparing use of licensed music, like they literally play Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting in the daytime. Like they're just throwing Elton John greatest hits at the wall, great songs not used sparingly. Maybe that's where all the budget went. Elton John is all over this movie in its obnoxious celebrity exploitation that he agreed to. And I've seen Elton John live before, so I know my Elton John. The Tiki Room song from the Enchanted Tiki Room attraction at Walt Disneyland Cali is also in this movie, cause funny, I guess. This is also technically a Disney movie because Touchstone Pictures, which is owned by Disney, was involved. And allegedly, John Lasseter rejected this idea. Like, the original people behind this wanted this to be a Pixar movie. Thankfully, John Lasseter was making good movies like Cars 2. Like, it's barely movie length and has one of the worst gimmicks for an adaptation I've seen. It's the anti-Muppet Christmas Carol, the peak of public domain gimmickal adaptations. The gimmick only conceived for a pun used incredibly unsparingly, like nothing happens, barely a movie, complete slog to get through. It's just a forgettable kids movie that didn't make an exceptional amount of money, but was still viable for the studios involved. But it ain't over because the film actually got a sequel, which might be the most pointless sequel of all time.
Hi everyone, I'm Elton John. Check out my new movie, Sherlock Gnomes, in theaters now.
Sherlock Gnomes in 2018. Once again, they clearly came up with the title before they came up with the plot. The title may imply that it's a spin-off, but it's a direct sequel. Norm of the North 4 and Land Before Time 14 are more justifiable sequels than this. Norm of the North was a hate bandwagon because it was so poorly received, so it got 3 direct-to-video movies to capitalize on the hate watching. The Land Before Time made money, so it makes sense it got 13 sequels and a show. But nobody gives a shit about Romeo and Juliet, and 7 years after the original by release date? Like, were they trying to cash in on nostalgia value? I mean, like, that's why Disney sequels have huge gaps. Just look at Inside Out 2, which just released. And this wasn't like a straight-to-Netflix sequel or anything. This was a major motion picture in America. No, a straight-to-Netflix sequel would make too much sense. That's like if The Star or Animal Crackers got a sequel this year, but no, this actually happened. So, Sherlock Gnomes isn't even the main character, it's Romeo and Juliet, and Sherlock Gnomes and Dr. Gnome Watson do tag along to the conflict. Like, why not just make a PG animated Sherlock Holmes movie? There aren't a whole lot of them. It's public domain. But I guess that wouldn't be epic because kids just love garden gnomes. It's sort of a Sherlock Holmes retelling. It's just a generic kids adventure with the inclusion of Sherlock Watson, Irene Handler, and Jim Moriarty. Moriarty isn't a gnome, he's like a pie mascot. He's like a porcelain figure that jumps off a shipping van and is sentient. His design is atrocious. It's not much of a detective movie, although unlike the first, they actually don't stick to the same 2 backyards. I guess that's slightly an improvement. Congrats, film, you have locations. The main plot being that now that the Montagues and Capulets are chill now, gnomes randomly start going missing, so they have to get the help of Sherlock Gnomes. Sherlock is barely a detective, like he looks at clues and like deduction, I guess, but like a case is barely cracked. This is the least detective-y detective movie I've ever seen. The disappearance of the gnomes is even on the news. I guess they have a news station now. Totally not lazily dumping exposition. There's also an attempt at romantic drama. Juliet wants to garden and Romeo doesn't. Married couple conflict. Hooray. Watson has a fake out death 35 minutes in and like he's a twist villain. More cliche crap. So he kidnaps all the gnomes because he's angry that Sherlock neglects him. Then Watson's henchmen betray him so he's magically good again? Like he's a twist villain and redeemed in the span of like 3 minutes. I'm not making this up. Why is he even redeemed? Why is he even a twist villain? But Moriarty isn't the good guy either, so they still have to defeat him and Watson's henchmen? The Elton John exploitation is back immediately. The animation is a slight improvement, probably because technology just got better because it'd been so long. Sherlock and Watson actually have pretty great designs for their concept. That's about as great as a Sherlock gnome could look. There are brief 2D animated segments inside Sherlock's mind, which actually gives good brief 2D animation. Irene has a musical number sung by Mary J. Blige because a pop song for marketability. Her relationship conflict with Sherlock is never resolved. Barely a movie, barely a Sherlock Holmes story, and is easily the most pointless sequel of all time. It bombed as if anybody wanted this, and even making this is legitimately one of the stupidest decisions in the history of film. And since Romeo and Juliet is something that the children of 2011 are like, oh yeah, that existed over. And thankfully, this legit attempt to franchise it didn't work because I'd hate to see more public domain characters get their gnome treatment for an hour and 17 minutes each. It had been apparent that the Muppets had been broken down to its most bankable aspects. They didn't disappear because they made too much money, but not enough money for Disney. But there were two men who realized what the characters had become, and it was their goal to turn it around. Jason Segel from How I Met Your Mama and British-American filmmaker Nicholas Stoller. James Bobin would end up directing the movie, and believe it or not, they somehow convinced Disney to dump $45 million into the Muppets. And that's more money than they'd seen in a long time. And this would end up being the first Muppet theatrical release since 1999. It had been long enough for nostalgia value, something Disney truly loves. The title of the comeback would be completely f***ing stupid. The Muppets. I've often heard the film referred to as Muppets 2011, so I'll call it that, since Disney didn't want to subtitle it themselves.
Sort of a creative producer with them, working alongside the two executives who I spoke to, where I would have been really a part of the day-to-day decision-making on the Muppets.
So how did the soft reboot of sorts turn out? Holy shit! It's not shit. It's f***ing great, actually. Not perfect, but it's way better than you'd expect considering the state of the franchise, you know, a generic holiday special 2 type shit. It's a genuine miracle of a film. The movie being benefited from its brutal honesty, evolving the plot in other aspects. It acknowledges that nobody has given a shit about the Muppets for the past 20 years or so, with the limited success of the 90s and all the B-movie garbage of the 2000s. And even if it had only been 3 years since their last project, excluding YouTube videos with generic holiday special 2, nobody f***ing watched that shit. For most adult audiences, it was probably the first time they saw these characters for a fat minute, and most kids, it was probably their introduction. Working excellently as an introduction and reintroduction, depending on your age in 2011. Something the characters needed after not being the most viable after the boss's death. This movie fulfills that need. The movie featuring an off-screen breakup of the ensemble as an allegory to their in-real-life decline in popularity, getting the gang back together, and even having Rolf and Scooter at their most prominent roles since Hunt's and Henson's deaths. The story is cliché, but to its advantage, a successful attempt at reviving the storytelling tone and humor of the Muppets in their prime. It actually uses many of the same clichés as generic holiday special, including a corporate villain raising money to save the theater. But it doesn't appear as a rehash because generic holiday special is cliché because it's lazy. Muppets 2011 is purposely simple to benefit the tone of previous beloved projects and expand its general audience appeal. In addition to be a rare instance of great fan service throughout, something I can't say for most franchises. From little things like Gonzo going back to his toilet roots or cameos from obscure Muppets, to the even more obvious recreation of the original Muppet Show as the Muppet Telethon. Using the show within a movie incredibly sparingly, the highlight being the barbershop quartet version of Smells Like Teen Spirit being a transformative cover with a sketch being built around it. Similar how you don't have to know the history of the Muppets to enjoy the Muppet movie, and its comical oversimplification of history, you don't have to understand any of the real-world allegories or fan service to enjoy this movie. The greatest strength of the film is its amount of risk that it takes creatively, including the main characters not really being the Muppets, but New Edition, Walter, and Jason Segel and Amy Adams' characters, Gary and Mary. The only disadvantage of its brutal honesty being the ending, which happens in the credits of the film, which was probably just Disney corporate meddling, let's be real. They shouldn't have not gotten their theater back, but at least had the advantage of a dedicated following, even if it wasn't enough, and each other's back, together with their new pal Walter. Concluding with optimism rather than victory could have benefited the slightly ironic nature of the Life's a Happy Song reprise to conclude the film, being more resemblant of the real-world struggles of professional art that Manhattan used so sparingly. In addition to the heart and humor balance that had been missing throughout the 2000s in all the instances of emotional moments failing miserably. This extends to the musical numbers. Some songs like Me Party and the villain song Let's Talk About Me just outright suck, but the good ones are really good. They were written by the musical comedy duo The Flight of the Conchords, an advantage to having experienced comedy musicians involved. Let's Talk About Me feels like a Nostalgia Critic sketch. It's bad at being bad on purpose. The irony is intentional and the jokes don't land, so it's not a delicious irony, so it's not funny. The song is severely cut down in the film, and even if the song sucks, every verse should have been included. Thankfully or unthankfully, the full song is on the soundtrack. Not a good song, but provides a villain motivation that could have bettered the narrative. It was probably Disney excluding it Christmas Carol style because it's not about Muppets and they think kids are stupid. But the good songs, however, are fucking amazing. Man or Muppets won an Academy Award for Best Original Song. It is the most ridiculously overdramatic song I've ever heard, perfectly combining the heart and humor, better than any other Muppet song that tries to do both. Typically, they're sad songs and funny songs. This is both perfectly. However, it only had one competitor, Real in Rio from Rio. Remember Rio? The song is amazing, but there was no competition, but the song is amazing. Pictures in my head and the reprise of Rainbow Connection capturing the heart of the movie. Including Rainbow Connection in this movie could have come off as nostalgia bait pandering, and it's a risk that pays off because it's shockingly used incredibly sparingly. It works great as an alternative version, a Piggy Kermit version, a duet version, a Steve Whitmire version, but succeeds narratively with the attempt at the Muppet Telethon being an attempt for a reunion. It makes sense to do something familiar on top of concluding Animal's character arc in the film, which is very nicely wrapped up. Animal getting an identity crisis subplot, which is a perfect little shitpost arc for a shitpost character. I love how it satirizes much of the children's entertainment garbage of the 2000s. And this came out in 2011, so we are still kind of in the era of like Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Squeakquel type kids movies, just lazy garbage banking on nostalgia. This entire movie could have been nostalgia bait garbage, but it's not. It's genuinely good fan service, and it's especially better than any right than it had to be. It's not a very technically impressive movie. Some of the effects aren't impressive at all and look like complete shit. At the end of the day, it is a 2010s Disney movie. It's not poorly shot in general, but there's none of that like grit or technical wizardry like previous movies. It's not perfect, but the highs are ridiculously high, and that true effort to revive the franchise was very apparent. It actually feels like the effort that the boss would have wanted. The film was a huge hit, but who didn't like it? Frank Oz. Oz in the 2010s onward has been very publicly critical of the current state of both the Muppets and Sesame Street. Not long after this movie, Oz would make his last guest puppeteer appearance on Sesame Street in season 43 in 2013.
I have something exciting to tell you!
Oz's statement on 2011 included, "I thought there was some wonderful things in it, but in general, I started to vomit when things get over-sentimental and sweet. It's all because Disney doesn't understand purity." And if he's referring to the ending being a little too happy-go-lucky, then I agree. I don't think 2011 suffered from a lack of Manhattan-like realism throughout. There's enough honesty, the ending just sucks ass. Speaking of ending and sucking ass, why the fuck is there a Cars 2 poster in the background? The film was a huge hit, the biggest box office hit for the Muppets. It was quadruple the budget, although not accounting for inflation. After its theatrical run, it apparently sold over 500,000 DVDs in 2012. I think the trio of Jason Segel, Nicholas Stoller, and James Bobin were great bosses of the franchise. A Henson substitute is integral for any Muppet project, and that trio filled the Jimmy Choo. The Muppets were f***ing back. However, in 2013, something took the family entertainment world by storm. Snowstorm.
Frozen. The first Frozen made $1.2 billion, and as somebody who was in elementary school when it came out, it was a huge deal. Due to Frozen's heavy marketing and success, it arguably overshadowed the next Muppet project, which released 5 months after Frozen. Muppets Most Wanted was greenlit shortly after 2011's success as an official sequel, the original title being The Muppets Again. In fact, it's referenced in the film.
It's the Muppets again, with the Muppets again.
But again, that is a really unspecific title to follow, a flaw with the previous. Muppets Most Wanted being a much better name because it's actually distinguishable. Much of the crew returned for the follow-up besides Jason Segel, stating that it was his mission to revive the franchise, and he succeeded with his mission. After all, he is an actor first, and he didn't do everything. So the Muppets were seemingly in good hands of Nicholas Stoller and James Bobin. Despite being acknowledged as a direct sequel, it really isn't. Which isn't really an issue from a narrative perspective. The movie isn't about Gary and Walter's relationship and takes a similar direction to Great Caper and Treasure Island of a pure comedy sequel. Although Walter is still a prominent character, so there's one consistency between the two films. And the plot does take advantage of the Muppets' re-rise to stardom at the end of the movie. A plot point that fortunately parallels what actually happened in real life. The show within a show movie element is also retained, with the Muppets performing old school Muppet shows live and done well once again. The direction also being similar to Great Caper with its heist elements and genre bending and subversion of cliches, being a doppelganger story with spy elements and a comedic musical. In fact, it's kind of like Cars 2, being a sequel with a world tour and familiar characters and spy elements, but not dog shit and logical as a direction. It's not perfect and it's not better than its predecessor, but I've noticed that it is a movie that is divisive amongst fans, much like Manhattan, and I think is far overhated. I agree with many of the common criticisms against the movie, but I don't think they're as detrimental to the quality and my overall enjoyment. As a pure comedy, it is one of the funniest, the humor easily being its greatest strength. It does not take any risks for its story, however, and I understand much of the disappointment surrounding this movie. Given the flaws of both, it's kind of a pick-your-poison situation. Not making a doppelganger plot heartfelt was a good decision because the characters have to be a little stupid to realize that Kermit has been replaced by Constantine, the world's most dangerous frog. Constantine easily being the most memorable villain in Muppet history.
Not so fast.
Where's Kermit? What do you want?
You have walked your last walker, bear.
A fellow Muppet is rarely the antagonist of Muppet conflicts. You know, like, besides, like, stupid-ass Wizard of Oz off the top of my head. Constantine was performed by Matt Vogel, and his performance is perfectly off. The amount of work put into Constantine's Kermit impression getting better as he impersonates him is a commendable and constant evolution. The little details like him thinking it's Sesame Street and getting the characters' names wrong, plus his puns are just really funny references. The way that Sam Eagle is incorporated as an anti-hero police officer is a really clever way of making a familiar character an obstacle in the plot given his pre-existing disapproval of the Muppet shenanigans. The soundtrack was only written by half of the Flight of the Conchords, Brett McKenzie. The songs here are more consistent in quality, even if there is less narrative risk to build around. There is one attempt at a dramatic number, Something So Right, which is a great song but does provide a slight tonal inconsistency. However, We're Doing a Sequel and the Interrogation song are comedic masterpieces communicating the spirit of the bosses and Jerry Jules' vision perfectly. We're Doing a Sequel being a perfectly meta number mocking Hollywood and its absurd sequels despite being one, in the process foreshadowing the atrocious film and concept that is Toy Story 4. Roasting The Godfather 3, the plot of the movie only being half decent, acknowledging that it's the 8th movie, it's perfectly meta, logical, and hilarious. The half-decent plot part is unintentionally true, as I do think the actual cracking of the case, discovering Kermit's been replaced, doesn't get enough focus. The interrogation song excellently translates the previous events of the movie with bickering between the officers with rhyme schemes that are clever. It's a lyrical wonder how it was structured coherently and relevantly and not have a forced rhyme scheme. It's shot like an actual interrogation too, which is a funny combination with the absurd imagery of the Muppets. The technical quality is still inferior to its predecessors. Given that it is an action plot, there is a lot more effects, and once again, not great, still a 2010s Disney movie. But hey, Constantine has a gun. Muppets with guns are based. It also has Diddy. The film has an extended version, but the theatrical version is only 107 minutes long, but the extended is 119 minutes long. Like, what's the fucking point of a 12-minute extended version? To sell DVDs? Probably. It's not really an extended version, it's the actual filmmaker's vision version. The no Disney corporate meddling cut. Almost 2 hours is a pretty reasonable runtime. I know children do have short attention spans at the end of the day, but 2 hours? If you can get the extended version, it's better because there's more jokes and a little less of a breakneck pace. It's not on Disney Plus currently. The interrogation song, the funniest part of the movie, is entirely cut down by an entire Gonzo verse. Like, why remove an entire verse of the song? But no, the extended movie version isn't even the full song either. On the soundtrack version, the Swedish chef's interrogation goes on for longer and it's hilarious. So the pointless extended edition doesn't even have the full song numbers. What the f? If Disney could do it in 92, they could do it in 14. The film has some serious flaws. I get why people tend to dislike it, but I think the Muppets were done an effortful justice once again. However, the movie bombed, which was unfortunate because it was a worthy successor, but it was apparent that the Muppets' brief renaissance was over. It was arguably overshadowed as a family movie since it came out 3 days after Frozen's DVD release, as well as the unexpected hit of the Lego Movie had just come out prior.
Y'all ready for this? Oh no, they were ready for that.
It also just wasn't as good, even if I do defend the movie. This is what the evil Kermit meme originated from, and I don't blame you if you didn't know that. And the right hands, James Bobin and Nicholas Stoller, were never involved with the Muppets again, although James Bobin claimed he wanted to revive the original Muppet Show. I imagine Disney didn't trust them since they failed financially. So where do they go? Back to DVD hell.
John, it's what I do. It's time to get Odie off the table.
Don't do it, Garfield. That's our pet dog, Odie.
Yeah, real is right because it's a real piece of shit.
This movie's plot is so unnecessarily convoluted. I guess it was a chance to up the scale to combat the blatant creative bankruptcy. If the animation looks familiar, it's because it uses the same art style as the Garfield show released in 2009. So despite what the art style may suggest, it's not set in the Garfield show verse. Well shit, I guess I gotta bring up the 2009 The Garfield Show. The Garfield show seems fine on the surface. Its intro is completely misleading and doesn't establish anything too out of brand. It has a really solid jazz instrumental tune with no shitty rapping, but if you watch the show, it's just weird for no reason and not in a creative way.
As folks think I am a cat, not somebody to be trusted. My father thinks I'm bad.
It's just riddled with, like, pointless conflicts. It's oddly sci-fi-ish at times and just throws whatever at the screen. This era of Garfield CG at least does a good job of making accurate geometry in comparison to the 2D iterations. It's not great animation, it's extremely plasticky, but at least it does resemble the Jim Davis art style in a three-dimensional format enough. The consistent animation errors are unintentionally hilarious. And there's even a scene they just flat out forgot to render, but aired it on TV anyway. It was fixed in later international airings, but like, come on, man. It's a show on television. I expect the scenes to be rendered.
This is worse than the time I kicked Odie off the...
There's worse Garfield media, but it's not better than And Friends, so there's no reason to watch it. It's that shit they'd air on TV when you're sick home from school or at the dentist office or something. You know, like Almost Naked Animals or whatever. Why do they have to be naked? Oh, it's because the word naked is funny. This movie takes place within a comic book universe, and there's an attempt at creating a wacky lineup of comic characters. But because they couldn't get the rights to any characters people actually give a fuck about, like Snoopy or the Lightbringer, the comic world aspect completely falls flat. Hell, they couldn't even get the rights to characters nobody gives a fuck about, like Marmaduke or Henry. Remember Henry? He's Henry. They didn't even include shit-ass Orson's Farm either. Okay, well, there are two licensed characters that nobody gives a fuck about. Dagwood from Blondie and Grimmy from Mother Goose and Grimm. Yeah, crossover 101 tips. Don't make it if you can't get the most gangsta characters. They do try to experiment with different art styles, but it looks like fucking shit. Why is the lesbian so realistic? That's not comic-y. The bear looks like shit in more ways than one. Who's this Duchess X Marge Simpson love child fuck? Why is her nose connected to her neck? Like, solid contender for worst
worst character design ever.
Look at Barbie. What a scary bitch.
Why must you always be fiddling with things? I mean, why can't you just sit quietly like a good husband?
Yes, dear.
Uh-oh, looks like he's getting pegged tonight with her fucking nose.
I'd take it in my crack to get some crack.
So, Garfield works for a comic company which takes pictures to send into the real world.
Cartoons not made by humans? Why, this is David Zaslav's paradise.
And we get to see the real world, in which everybody is obsessed with the Sunday funnies, because that's what kids in 2007 give a fuck about. And Garfield is like suicidal or whatever, and he wants to go into the real world. This movie is very relatable because I want to go to heaven after watching it. This is the point in the plot where it becomes completely inappropriate for the type of story it's trying to tell. It's trying to do that, oh yeah, going into the real world shit. The real world humans all have fucking awful designs, but for an animated movie, it has a very live action remake of animated premise. So Garfield is like homeless now.
They just filmed me after John got tired of my diarrhea.
So now Garfield is going to get replaced even though this is clearly what he wanted. So it's up to the shitty side characters to help get Garfield and Odie out of the real world. There's these like fucking Ivan Drago animals that just show up and lynch Garfield and Odie and some fucking homeless cat, and then they start a PS1 fire.
I love violence against the homeless. They have crack.
But then they're okay. Everything's hunky-dory. So, you guessed it. There has to be an epic dance party scene because it's a 2000s kids movie. Nothing happens the whole movie, and Garfield doesn't even get real until like 40 minutes in. The only conflict in the movie that's actually resolved is Garfield going back to the comic world. I guess he doesn't want to kill himself anymore. I'm not even sure that as a kid if I even finished this movie or not, because I remember hating it as a kid, and I don't remember anything from the second or third act. It's a movie with such an unnecessarily convoluted plot that has nothing to do with the source material, in which so little actually happens in it.
You're going into orbit, you stupid muff.
Garfield.
Time for a nap. I'm a cat who loves to snooze.
Fun Fest. What a lame fucking title. The cover seems to imply that Es Gato Española or Rara.
I run cross country all the time. The Colombian kind is authentic.
The movie opens with like a 2D prologue that makes me wish the whole movie was like this, you know, but fully animated, which establishes that animals drink the mythical funny water to try and become funny. Less than 2 minutes in, and there's already dancing for no reason. So Fun Fest is a talent show, and Garfield wants to participate in it. And oh great, this bitch is back.
Garf, that's like fucking rape. You can't do that.
I'm famous. I'll get away with it.
So Garf's on a quest for some pussy's pussy.
Watch and spit it if you want to give me $100.
And he has to rig the talent show by getting funny water.
This makes me nostalgic for helping Bush get elected.
So unfunny bullshit shenanigans ensue. So he starts gambling for his drugs.
Jay-Z wouldn't give me $100 to gamble with. Thankfully, parents have an unlimited amount of money.
So Garfield meets up with the fucking Keebler elf, and he has to learn how to be funny. Then they waste an unnecessary amount of time training, and there is so much fucking filler. Don't like cats hate water. Oh yeah, I forgot. Garfield is a cat.
Fool, I don't drink funny water. I drink Coca-Cola with cocaine, of course.
Garfield, don't hit the first tower. So during Garfield's jihad, he breaks the funny water bottle accidentally, so he can't rig the election anymore. And the Keebler elf comes back and is like, oh, Garfield, funny water is a scam like Big Pharma. Garfield, you can do it. So then he goes and starts fighting the random Hispanic fuckboy pussy, and it's a robot, and his dancing was a scam like Big Pharma.
Sadly, the pigs don't take he may be a robot as an excuse to assault minorities anymore.
Then, oh no, it's not a robot, it's normal in a mech. And all the single ladies wanted to fuck normal the entire time, so he's like 4 years old, you're going to jail. Much like the previous, it's just a complete fucking nothing movie. It's set in like the span of an afternoon. Like, sure, there's no multiverse bullshit, it's easier to follow, but it's more boring and fucking lame and stupid, and has nothing to do with Garfield. I don't even know if I finished this movie movie as a kid. I do remember at least getting to this motherfucker and then seeing his accordion legs and hating it. It's just shitty and boring, doesn't need to exist, but oh snap, the finale of the trilogy.
Can we just watch Hot Latina Pussy Adventures 44 instead?
I hate Aaron clocks. I'm damn hungry. I want some lasagna.
You're eating us out of house and home. Garfield.
So this movie I actually really liked as a kid. In fact, I remember saying I liked this movie, but not really the Garfield show. I can recall watching it more than once, actually, on both Netflix and Cartoon Network. As a kid, my favoring of this movie made me curious to check out the previous two. What is this fucking cover? Why is Garfield a superhero? Cats aren't energetic. Well, Garfield is probably a superhero because it's 2009, motherfucker. The death of cinema itself, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is in its infancy. So blah blah blah, they tried to capitalize on a rising trend. Except this wasn't an original concept. This was an obscure piece of Garfield history. In the late 90s, Jim Davis was like out of ideas or something and was like, wait, I'm a comic funny man. Why can't I be a comic action man? Switching the genre of comic, so fuck it, Garfield superheroes. And nobody gave a fuck about Garfield superheroes because it's a complete fucking oxymoron of a concept. Now, let's go back to when Thanos' car was the peak of comedy, and everyone was making, like, Avengers Endgame memes, with, like, one of the main punchlines being, random characters fighting Thanos. And at the time, those memes triggered a since-repressed memory that Garfield was a superhero at a point, and I liked it. Probably because I was super into Marvel Superhero Squad at the time, which was my introduction to a lot of the famous characters. For the record, I liked Thanos before he was a car. The pet force consists of Garzuka, Odious, Starlina, and Abnormal.
Can't forget me, Cat and Save-A-Ho.
These character designs are cursed and perfectly represent how much of an oxymoron Garfield superheroes is. So this movie goes back to the multiverse bullshit and as an alternate universe of the cartoon world, which is a comic book world. And John is the king and wants some pussy, and alternate universe Liz offers to be the bride with the intention of taking over the world as queen. Yeah, it took us 3 movies to finally introduce Liz, which is a perfect representation of Garfield not being Garfield. Because Liz is kind of an important character to Garfield lore, let's be real. You know, because presumably John lets Garfield get fat so he has an excuse to go see the veterinarian, you know, who he wants a prostate exam from.
Now what about those keys to the kingdom?
So, Normal is obsessed with the Pet Force comics, which are comics within the cartoon world, which I guess function in the same way that the comics exist in the human world. Get real, bitch! But then Garzuka shows up to Garfield's house and is like, Garfield, we have to assemble the Avengers.
Pungent yet satisfying.
Say yes to drugs. It way more fun.
That Garfield?
Not unless he's been putting something in his milk.
Oh god, not this bitch again. Liz has a gun that can do anything. I fucking hate it when villains just have weapons with no rules. Like, just poison everybody so they can die, you stupid bitch, doctor.
She's coming.
Who's coming?
Vet Vix.
Who's this vet?
Oh, it's because she's Liz Cheney.
I love being Bush's cabinet.
So Garfield is getting held hostage and it cuts between shitty action scenes and shitty hostage scenes. Over and over again. Oh look, it's my favorite font, Comic Sans. So because gun, they have to fight off zombies. And then all the shitty side characters start kicking zombies in the balls. And because gun, there's an Attack on Titan garbage monster. Then Garfield snatches Liz's gun. Yes, Garfield has canonically held a gun. This movie is 10 years old, but still perfectly represents what Garfield has become, not an orange cat being an asshole. He's just anything but. Like, he should not be holding weapons. And then Liz ain't a Cheney no more, and she's redeemed for causing a terrorist attack, like her daddy. This entire movie is just like one shitty fight scene. There's so little drama surrounding the action that it makes it difficult to be invested in the presence of danger. You know, a conflict Garfield
Garfield logically wouldn't be facing? There's no like 3-act structure either. It's like Act 1, 15 minutes long, then Act 2 the rest, one fight scene.
So the moral of the story is don't be a fucking sellout or your brand will lose its identity. Or in Garfield's case, become a fucking crackhead. Yes, I'm aware there's another Garfield movie that's not out yet. I don't expect that to be anything exceptionally terrible, so I decided not to talk about it. Don't confuse the Garfield movie with Garfield the movie.
Garf's in the house and you don't stop. Henry's in the house and you don't stop.
Damn, you the type of girl I just can't pass over. Give me one chance and I'll bend your ass over.
Twilight Sparkle versus Monica! Begin! Oh no! It's Southern California! I could play video games on a TV made by Sony!
Oh shit, it's Bill Cosby!
Alright, at this point, it's kind of heavily agreed that Cartoon Network kind of fucking sucks nowadays, and there's always those people that are like, oh, Cartoon Network fucking sucks nowadays, it was so much better in the 90s and 2000s, and yeah, I kind of agree with that, but believe it or not, there was a time from about 2010 to 2016 or so, where Cartoon Network was actually good again. Yeah, sure, now and again, there was an annoying orange, and Teen Titans Go was still a fucking thing. But we just got tons of great shows from this era overall, and I would not say Cartoon Network died after the 2000s. Wait a second. No, not you. Fuck you, get out of here. However, the show often credited to this large resurgence in quality content within this era, hell, arguably saving Cartoon Network entirely, is Regular Show. Hell, some may even consider it the greatest Cartoon Network show ever made. However, does it live up to any of those titles? Oh, hell fucking yes it does. Now, Regular Show was a series I discovered very early within its lifespan. If not the beginning, I'm not exactly sure. It's possible I might have seen the pilot debut, you know, without even realizing it. But after I first discovered the series, I was instantly hooked because I was just amazed by the absurdness without even realizing it. Like, within my early viewings of the show, I was like, what the fuck are these characters? A bird, a raccoon, a yeti, a guy with a big head, a gumball machine, a ghost, a green thing, what the fuck? But that what the fuck aspect about it is what got me to love it in the first place. And personally, that's part of why I think it makes the show so great. And you know, I first watched this when I was like 6 or 7, so it took me a little bit to realize why it was called Regular Show in the first place, because it kind of threw me off. But then one day, I just had that moment, I was like, oh, it's called Regular Show because it's regular at first, but then something crazy happens despite the setup being completely weird. I think it's a really good representation of the creativity and well-incorporated absurdity of the show. Like, the main lineup is so diverse in its characters. The show manages to be, like, creative and weird to the point where it's not disgusting, especially compared to some of the other late 2000s, early 2010s Cartoon Network shows. Like, The Problem Solver, Jesus fuck, this show's giving me a seizure. Yes, this is the animation style. Or, like, Secret Mountain Fort Awesome, which were on around the same time, and, like, let's look at these characters from Cameron Boyce, the show. Oh, look. A human, I think. A robot. Domo-kun, it's literally just fucking Domo-kun. Or the Secret Mountain Fort Awesome ones are even worse. Like, what the actual fuck are these characters? A green ball with acne. Spike-R from Masters of the Universe. A blue thing. This pencil scribble monkey motherfucker. A giant muscular asshole. Like, this is just weird to the point where it's disgusting. And sure, you may be able to admire said disgustingness, like, I think another Adult Swim show from around the same era, King Star King, which is just absolutely fucking disgusting. But, like, at least with that, even if it is disgusting, I can at least admire the creativity and what makes it so disgusting in the first place. Like, even if it does want to make you throw up, you can at least, like, admire the creativity behind it. But Regular Show, I feel like, is just the right level of explicit, because, like, the restrictions from the network obviously prevent it from being too disgusting. So obviously, yeah, it's still a kid's show, but you can kind of look at it where it's something that could work without such aspects, and it still manages to work in its own right. Like, any of the scenes where they drink soda or eat wings, like, it's so obvious it's just beer, but the fact that they didn't make it beer allows a much wider age range of people to watch it. You know, as a kid, I kind of picked up this obviously wasn't the most kid-appropriate thing, and I felt slightly more mature for being able to watch it. And, like, this is mainly because Cartoon Network used to be more open to adult-oriented content around the time that regular show came out. Like, don't get me wrong, they can never get away with this now, and the show does become progressively less adult as it goes on. This is how they were able to get shit like 16 on the network, which only aired on Cartoon Network for seasons 3 and 4, and Nickelodeon on the first 2. You know, there was minor cursing and innuendos and shit, but the most notorious example would probably be Total Drama Karen Took the Kids, which is still a thing, by the way, but it's a baby spinoff, and also the main show is being resurrected. But like, the first season or so of Total Drama was full of shit that they would never get away with now.
Well, you don't see that every day. No, you don't, my man. No, you don't.
The two most notorious jokes being the boobies and the you backstabbing lying little beep. Now, to be fair, regular show never did anything as adult as Total Drama Karen Took the Kids, but I mean, like, it was adult enough to be censored in the UK.
Hey, look at me, I'm British.
Wow, epic fail.
And in the American version as well, but mainly in the UK.
British?
And with the adult jokes, even if sometimes the joke flew past my head, I would still sometimes notice differences in dialogue.
You pissed me off. You ticked me off.
And don't get me wrong, not everything flew past my head, but a lot of shit did.
I can't believe you told her you'd water all these. What a chump.
It's because Margaret's my friend.
Yeah, your friend without benefits.
If you live outside of the United States, I recommend watching the American version if you can get your hands on it. Yes, America.
Go ahead and you stack spaghetti sauce at a store and in a supermarket. You control the guy or the woman who brings out the carts on a forklift. What happens? They make you management.
Like, here's a really weird edit to me. Like, in the scene from The Power where the wizard pisses in the bush, well, in the UK version, they took the piss audio out and made it seem like he was masturbating instead. What the fuck? You unintentionally made it worse. There's a good series by Unreal Raccoon that showcases all the regional differences. I'll leave a link to the description below. But whether it was the adult jokes or just not, the show universally agreed to be fucking hilarious. Most of the humor is taken from situational absurdity and dialogue within the argument humor. The argument humor in itself is hilarious.
Turd! You're a turd! No, you're a turd! You're the turd! You're... No! Mordecai, Rigby, stop! We can all be turds.
Mordecai and Rigby have really good chemistry. J.J. Quintel, the creator, surprisingly does a really good job of playing Mordecai, which is surprising because it's just his normal talking voice, as famously stated by his Twitter bio. But, like, there is some serious voice acting talent here, like Mark Hamill of all people.
A long time ago, in a high school far, far away.
But, me and my gang of retards I barely remember from elementary school, we used to just quote this shit all the time, even if the joke made no sense out of context. Oh, any fucking time I made cereal as a kid, I would just talk to myself and quote this.
Milk. Cereal. Combine.
Like, on the last day of 3rd grade, we just sang the aw snap, come to our macaroni party and we'll take a nap song for like 10 straight minutes. Our regular show actually got 8 seasons in 1 movie, which is much more than most kids' shows, even successful ones, might I add. But, of course, with so many seasons, it eventually resulted in me falling behind on the series. Now, eventually, my family stopped paying for cable around season 4 or so I couldn't see the new episodes whenever they decided to air them. But say if I was at someone else's house or I was on vacation or something, I would get a chance to see some of the new episodes. But to see all the new episodes, I had to eventually resort to collecting DVDs, except the only DVD of the series I ever owned and still own is season 3. And this was because at one point seasons 1 and 2 used to be on Netflix, so I was good with that under the assumption that they would be there forever, which is stupid. But I could never find the DVDs of the other seasons, otherwise I totally would have bought them. The only other DVD I could only ever find was the Series 1 and 2 combo pack, which I never bothered to own. Like I said, I could watch them on Netflix. And then Season 3, which I already had. But that's because no region ever got the full series on DVD. Now, of course, they're available on streaming. That's how I watched them for this video. But Region 1, US and Canada, only got physical releases of 1, 2, and 3, and the movie. I don't know, I just thought it was worth mentioning because it affected my experience with the show. And you know, you figured with it being an American cartoon, all the DVDs would be available in America.
Meanwhile... Oh my fucking god, they destroyed the place from Korean House. What the hell? No, no, no!
Like, its neighbor, Adventure Time, has all the seasons on DVD. What the fuck? But since half the fucking show wasn't available in its country of origin in the media format of my choice, I never even saw, like, half the show. I mean, like, there is a complete series box set out there, but only in Australia, not the entire region, just Australia. And pretty much since I began falling behind, to be perfectly honest, I always wondered, wait, what was the full story? And of course, there were other ways to watch it, but, you know, I was into other stuff at the time, and it's not like I was absolutely desperate to watch them or anything, but every now and again I wondered, yeah, what the fuck happened in all the seasons that I never saw? It was just a back thought, like, forever, and then one day I was like, fuck it, I'm finally gonna watch all the episodes. And I wish I did earlier. Now, I'm gonna get into spoiler territory and provide a general overview of my opinions on each season now, assuming that you've seen the show before because you clicked on the video. But I mean, the show did have 8 seasons, and that's a lot of seasons, so I'm going to assume that most people haven't seen the entire show. There are over 200 episodes, but I highly recommend taking the time to watch all of it. It's got its issues down the line, but if you've only seen a fraction and like that fraction, then I recommend watching all of it. It is definitely worth your time. Anyway, let's get into spoiler territory for each season. Alright, Season 1 fucking rules. I think every episode, while not all of the greatest episodes necessarily, are funny and memorable in their own right. Now, like most shows, it is a little weird coming back to the first episode, especially because it's a comedy. Like, Pops is portrayed as like this weird guy that no one likes at all. And they kind of establish that Mordecai and Rigby, they just kind of hate Muscle Man too. Benson is still pissed all the time, but nowhere near as easily angered as he is in the later seasons, which made his character so memorable. High Five Ghost didn't really do anything about the entire season, and Mordecai and Rigby are much less destructive than they are in the later seasons. I mean, like, the first episode of the entire show literally focuses on how they break a thing and they're trying to fix it, but later in the show, they're just breaking things for no reason, all willy-nilly. I'm like, prior to my rewatch of the first episode, The Power, aka the first episode, was my favorite episode, and I still think, even if it's weirded out of place, it is still one of the best episodes. And I do kind of strangely prefer the rougher animation in the early seasons, and of course, the edgy humor is on point, but I just do like the rougher animation. I kind of wish they kept this art direction, to be honest, but this season is just fucking classic all around. Now, if we combine the length of Season 1 being 12 episodes and Season 2 being 28, that totals to 40, in which Seasons 3, 4, 5 had 40, 6 had 31, 7 had 39, and 8 had 31. So that's basically 40 episodes per season, and hell, it's probably why Seasons 1 and 2 were sold together, and that's a pretty equal value. And to be honest, Season 2 just kind of feels like Season 1 Part 2, but I think Season 2 overall shares the positives and the negatives of the first season, and at the end of the day, I do think it is better than Season 1, mainly because there's just more episodes, but most of these episodes are great, and they're just fucking classic all around. As I've established, this is the only season I ever owned on DVD, so I was actually the most excited to revisit this one because I'd seen it the most times as a kid. And I think Season 3 is what really shaped the show into what it's most known for and what it became. I think it's truly the point where it's found its identity as a show. I mean, like, fuck, I don't think there's a single bad episode in Season 3. It's not my favorite season, but it easily has the largest quantity of good episodes. And this is where the show truly started to focus more on the entire Parks squad. I mean, like, we get to see more of other characters' life outside of work, which I think is interesting to see. The season also introduced the Terror Tales from the Parks series, which I just gotta say, I'm not the biggest fan of these episodes. They're not abysmal or anything, it's just basically Treehouse of Horror, but with the regular show characters. But the entire point of the Treehouse of Horror episodes is that they can just do whatever the fuck they want. They just drop all logic and restrictions of the world because it's fictional and non-canon. Except it kind of works much better in The Simpsons because The Simpsons is much more realistic, even if it is a satire of everyday life, and regular show really kind of isn't.
He's right! Individually we are weak, like a single twig! But as a bundle we form a mighty faggot!
And you know, it takes place in a world where it's just weird as fuck constantly. I don't know, these Halloween episodes just really aren't the most interesting to me. These just kind of feel like things that could happen on a weekly basis in reality of the show. I'm like, they really aren't that different from the normal show. I don't think we needed them annually from season 3 to 8 having 2 of them. However, there are good segments throughout, and despite me not being a huge fan of the Halloween series of episodes overall, the one in season 3 is great. It's one of my favorite episodes of the show. And like this season, while not necessarily the best, I think it has the largest quantity of good episodes, the good episodes being all of them, and it is overall a really nostalgic season. This was the first season that I hadn't seen all of prior to my rewatch, and I would also say that season 3 is also the end of the classic era. Now, I'm just gonna get this out of the way, there are no bad seasons of regular show, even the ones I don't consider to be the weakest. Season 4 overall is a really good season. I'm like, hell, its premiere Exit 9B is another fan favorite, and again, arguably the greatest episode, and I agree that it's certainly up there. Now, and I'd seen a good portion of the season 4 episodes prior to the rewatch, and the addition of Thomas, I think, was really well handled. Yeah, it's a new character introduced a few seasons of an episodic comedy, but when there's nothing for him to do, he doesn't do anything, and that's a really smart move on the writer's part. Cough, cough, Fairly Odd Parents. Prior to my rewatch, I just figured he was some random background character because I never actually saw any of the episodes he got focused, or Exit 9B, the episode he was introduced in. But I think it is a good example of how to add a new character and make it actually purposeful, and you know, fucking good. Another notable episode is the Christmas special. Now, I fucking shit my pants the first time I saw this episode. I actually remember renting the Cartoon Network Holiday Collection DVD multiple times from my local ghetto shithole Ohio library, which was a compilation that featured the Christmas specials for Adventure Time, regular show, Gumball, and for some reason an episode of Clarence and the stupid fucking Steven Universe pancake filler episode. But overall, yeah, I really like this season. Solid overall. I have a lot of the same thoughts on seasons 5 and 6, so I'm just gonna talk about them together. Season 5 is the weakest season of the entire show. That does not mean it's a bad season. I just think it's the least good. Still a damn entertaining one overall. But this season mainly focuses on Mordecai. So, season 4, Margaret leaves the show, and his relationship drama, which I know some people despise, but I actually think is kind of a mixed bag overall, in terms of how it's executed. Now, like I said, I began to fall behind on the seasons, and I was able to see some episodes from seasons 4 to 7, but I was just kind of confused on whatever the hell was going on in the episodes that I have seen that focus on this arc prior to the rewatch. So, I guess it was kind of clever to bring back a one-off character from season 3, and make her a full character. Now, the gimmick of CJ being able to turn into a giant cloud and affect the weather depending on her feelings, I guess is a cool gimmick. Like, it's cool to see the non-human characters actually utilize their traits as their animals. Like, Mordecai doesn't do shit, even though he's a bird, he never flies or anything. And like, Rigby will walk on all fours sometimes, and curls his tail. And there are a few jokes about Benson being a gumball machine throughout the show.
You morons! Get back here and help me pick up my gumballs!
Like I said, the absurdity of the world is part of what makes the show so entertaining in the first place. You know, that's what allows all these shit hits the fan favorite moments. That's what makes them possible to occur. And the fact that all these life forms casually exist and you're not really supposed to question about it. I mean, like, Mordecai and Rigby literally walk around naked. Like, Pam in season 7 is a good example of this. Like, bitch, you're rallying a fucking gumball machine. But CJ's character clearly wasn't designed for this role. She was designed to provide a single shit hits the fan moment in a single episode, and they really do not make her a likable character. And to be honest, Eileen is the only strong female character in the entire show. Not that any of them are particularly bad, well, besides CJ, but like most of them are just there to serve a purpose, like Starla or Miss I-69 a Gumball Machine. You know, they're there to serve the role of a love interest, and they serve that role well. They're just not the most interesting. But CJ CJ doesn't really feel like that unique of a character. I mean, like, there are episodes like Portable Toilet or Video 101 where she's not pointless to the script, but it could be Margaret and it would be the exact same thing, and it just kind of comes off as pointless for certain aspects of the show. And then when Margaret comes back into the show and the love triangle edition of the plotline starts, you know, because they're basically the same fucking character, you don't really have anyone to root for. And to be fair, that's not strictly true. CJ actually has a larger quantity of interest shared with Mordecai, and at some point they do actually have a healthy relationship. But I still think, despite them being basically the same character, Margaret doesn't really make that many just fucking stupid and unreasonable decisions. Like in the 1000th Shopper Flight episode, where CJ literally almost kills Mordecai, Margaret, and her parents. Like, what the fuck? Now, I will give the writers some credit for directly acknowledging that her actions are wrong, but they really just do not do anything to expand her flaws as a character. And I think that's one of the best aspects of the show, addressing flaws in the characters. Like, yeah, I know Mordecai is a simp, and it's pretty much a meme at this point, to be honest. But yeah, I agree, Mordecai is a simp.
You probably shouldn't go, Margaret. I bet your boyfriend won't like you going on a camping trip with two dudes.
Ugh, what boyfriend? I'm not seeing anyone right now. Guys are jerks.
God, I know, right? Guys are the worst.
There are tons of episodes that mainly focus on Mordecai putting Margaret above himself, leading to consequences. Like It's Time, I think, is a really well-executed, exaggerated portrayal of consequences that may arise because of these types of actions. Sammy Classic style.
When are you two gonna learn that your actions have consequences?
The episodes of the show that explore how flawed some characters are as people, or whatever the fuck they are, I think the show is really good at exploring that dark side of reality. Another one of my favorite episodes, Over the Top, successfully displays this type of exaggerated real-life consequences, with Skips accidentally killing Rigby. But then we just cut back to CJ, who's just not an interesting character because they barely explore her side of the relationship and the parts that make it not work. But however, in episodes in this plotline, they further explore Mordecai as a character, like Maxin and Relaxin, for example, which I think are really well-constructed episodes. But that is only a fraction of the episodes, and not all of it is bad. I just think there is a larger quantity of bad episodes within seasons 5 and 6, and with all the love triangle shit, if they just explored CJ's side of it, it would be significantly more interesting. But also in seasons 5 and 6, I would say the formula just gets a little stale. Not bad necessarily, but you just know where it's going most of the time. You know, I kind of consider these seasons to be the Mega Man 6 of the franchise, where, yeah, I wouldn't consider it a bad game, but the formula just gets a little stale, and it's not as good as its predecessors or future installments, but still good nonetheless. Because I still say these are good seasons, with some amazing episodes throughout. Skip's story is another fan favorite episode, and rightfully so, and it's so obviously established that he's seen some shit, and it's finally cool to see what shit he saw. Finishing Thomas's arc was really well done and didn't really feel that rushed. The Thanksgiving special is also great. I love the fact that Donald Trump is literally the villain, like that's fucking hilarious. Regular show has so many just creative and great one-off villains, and then just fucking Donald Trump.
The people of India are going crazy that President Obama was constantly chewing gum. And then on top of that, he took it out of his mouth, put it back. You can't do it. It's disgusting.
Like, that just makes so much sense for some reason. I can't even explain why. And it's also kind of ironic considering one of the characters consistently says you're fired. And the fact that Cartoon Network is a very left-leaning network nowadays, I will not be surprised if this episode gets blacklisted in the future. Like, look at the crap on their Instagram. Oh yay, confirming that Darwin is black. That's fine until you realize that there's an episode where Richard bought him.
Hey, when we're older, let's get married. Ha! You can't get married. Why not? Black people can't marry white people.
Hey now.
It's Garnet from Steven Universe.
Kids, don't be racist.
This just in, we're live at the place with Corey in the house, where we have officially gotten confirmation that racism has ended, all thanks to a stupid fucking Steven Universe commercial. I know, that is epic. Thank you, Steven Universe commercial, for fucking ending racism.
And to be perfectly honest, I was only expecting the series to get worse from here, but nope, I was pleasantly surprised. Season 7 is a huge improvement over the previous seasons. Now, for one thing, I think it's far more normal, dare I say regular, in the situations that the episodes consist of, and it does rely a lot less on the shit hits the fan formula. I mean, like, it's still there, but it's utilized a lot less frequently and faithfully, and it's less obvious when it does happen, so it kind of really doesn't even feel like the same show anymore, which is obviously gonna turn people off. I mean, like, it still pretty much has everything else that makes the show great in its own right, but I think successfully manages to pull off the episodic format, and in this case, I actually really like the direction. I mean, like, you kind of want it to go back to normal, and then you remember that seasons 5 and 6 exist, which the formula got really stale throughout in. My biggest issue with seasons 5 and 6 is that they are just repetitive as hell. And like I said, it's gonna throw some people off, but yeah, even if you dislike this season, at this point, there were over 190 episodes, so they kinda had to do something different. Like, even if you don't like the new South Park episodes, which are very debatably good, you gotta give them credit for not regurgitating the same shit for decades like its neighbors Family Guy and The Simpsons. But actually, bringing up South Park again, I feel like this is what South Park Season 20 should have been. This season mainly focuses on multiple story arcs, of mainly giving much more focus to Rigby and Benson of all characters, with the arcs of the Dome Experiment and more focuses on Benson relationships and Rigby's graduation, all of which successfully maintain the episodic format, like I said, pretty much throughout the entirety of each. I think there's also a lot more variety between episodes too, mainly because it is a subversion of the normal formula of episodes, and just has a lot more just laid back character development. And not every episode of shit hits the fan in the weirdest way possible too, but don't get me wrong, that aspect of what makes the show great is still there. Rigby going back to high school arc serves a really good, really strong development. And as a kid, Rigby was my favorite character, mainly because I guess he was funny.
The only thing you're better than me at is being a big piece of...
But now that I'm older and obviously have full context of the entire series, Rigby is still my favorite character, mainly because he's easily the most developed character, with Mordecai and Rigby essentially switching roles in the story as the show progresses. You know, it actually provides a really interesting perspective and change, and they further explore that flawed aspect of Mordecai as a character. And like I said, exploring how flawed the characters are is one of the show's largest redeeming qualities. And by the end of the season, in Rigby's graduation day special, it makes sense how they make up in the end, despite them kind of just arguing throughout the entirety of the episode. And the final scene of the season is also great as well. Now, having minor knowledge about the next season, I knew where it was going, but the ending of Season 7 is a really genuinely intense moment too, which sets up Season 8. But before Season 8, we just gotta talk about one more thing. Yeah, why does no one ever talk about this? Now, when they first dropped the trailer, I was actually really hyped, but I just never got around to watching it. I don't even have an excuse for not seeing this one this time around. I'm like, it did get a DVD release in the US, confirmed to be set between Season 6 and 7. I'm like, technically, it was first released on digital in September of 2015, on DVD in October, and it aired on TV in November, which is actually really good timing because that's right around the time that the Rigby High School story arc begins. And in this movie, we get to see the characters in high school, and now the movie itself does just kind of feel like an hour-long episode, which I think is fine, this being a TV movie and all, and it actually works really well as a result. And I'm glad it actually takes the time to further explore previously established concepts within the show, like time travel and Mordecai and Rigby's past, and to be honest, it's just kind of more of a further character study rather than some big grand storyline. And don't get me wrong, they do some of that, but I feel like some of the 22-minute specials feel higher in scale than the movie, which might throw some people off. But it also just kind of serves as a what-if question, like what if Mordecai and Rigby weren't friends anymore? And it does so much with the concept. Yeah, it's got a let's save the universe plot, but it's not really about that. And considering where Season 8 goes, I think that particular aspect was handled better in Season 8. But we actually get to see their previous actions from seasons further come into play. Like, it reminds me of the Josh is Done episode of Drake and Josh, where it takes a really realistic approach to this type of situation. And the twist of the only reason why the whole stupid fucking show is occurring is that Rigby's actions, done out of his insecurities as a person or raccoon, surprisingly really down to earth. I'm like, Mordecai and Rigby's friendship is literally built on a lie. And at one point, Rigby nearly kills himself over this.
Fly me into the sun so I won't have to be so sad anymore.
Fuel cells critical.
No, come on, stupid ship, stupid ship.
And it makes sense how they make up in the end. And if there is fan service in this movie, but it was minimal and subtle, and I think it was only done if it was served purpose in the story. Father Time's cameo was great. It was cool to see him essentially do the same scene as his original appearance, but with Rigby. And Mr. Ross was a really cool antagonist. I kind of wish the other members of the park had to do just a little more to do. They weren't pointless, and they weren't neglected either. But overall, it does kind of suck how overlooked this movie is. I wouldn't consider it a flop. I mean, like, it got 2 million viewers on its premiere, and was even got a limited release in theaters, which is actually pretty cool. Like, I wouldn't consider it a masterpiece or anything. It's still a really solid movie. It's not one of my favorite movies of all time, considering it's based on a pre-existing animated TV series like the original SpongeBob or the South Park movie, which I do consider to be 2 of my favorite movies, but this I wouldn't say is. So yeah, it's not a masterpiece or anything, but I definitely do think it deserves more attention and does some things really well. Season 8 is really good. Now, I have my issues with it, but I really enjoyed Season 8 overall. Or should I say, regular show in space. Ooh, fancy. And it's a particular aspect that's gonna throw some people off. Now, I do think Season 8 just kind of feels like Season 7 in reverse, where I felt Season 7 was a lot more regular and a lot less weird, which made it work. But this season is a lot more weird and less regular, and again, that's gonna throw some people off, hell, probably even more than Season 7. And I know there are people that tend to dislike this particular season, but hey, I really enjoy it, and I know tons of other people do as well, so. And don't get me wrong, the in-space direction does not feel like a pandering or shitty corporate decision at all, and it feels completely justified, and they do a lot more with the concept than expected. However, one thing I do think is really inconsistent throughout the entire season is like when oxygen is necessary. You know, in the first episode, they literally go to the moon and they don't need it. Hell, in the very first episode of this season, there's like zero consistency in when oxygen is needed at all. Now, if we take all the episodes of this season, I would personally divide them into 2 categories: the main story arc and the filler stuff. And the filler stuff is kind of a mixed bag. I'm like, there are some really good episodes like Fry's Night and Can You Hear Me Now? But also some just like weak episodes like Ugly Moons and Space Creds. But the good episodes certainly outweigh the bad, even if there is bad. I would say all the episodes that are in the main story arc of the season, I think, are all great. What they do with Pops is really good too. It's obvious it was never the plan. Like, what literally happens to him in season 1 of the show? But it's still cool nonetheless, and they actually do something interesting with the Chosen One concept for once, or Anti-Pops, or Malum Krampus is really cool to see a reoccurring villain in the series for once, since pretty much almost all the villains are one-off, or sometimes they come back, but for the most part just one-off villains. And it's actually cool to see a main villain for a story arc. Now, you gotta give them credit for calling him Anti-Pops instead of making the same mistake that the Fairly Odd Parents did. Hey, he said it, not me. And I love how they reflect upon the show as you are the viewer, and the finale itself is fucking perfect. It's one of the greatest endings to a kid's show I've ever seen. I love how they actually brought Lollyland into play, and knowing the show's history, even if I hadn't seen every episode, I thought that was a really interesting incorporation. And if you didn't know the original short that the character of Pops first starred in, the naive man from Lollyland,
I said good show. Very good show.
know, that was his home planet. So it's actually cool to see him go from the main planet. You know, I always like it when shows reincorporate their predecessors in the final product, like the South Park Season 4 Christmas special, where you actually get to see the characters make the shorts that precurse the show. But they actually do a really good job of symbolizing that the world of regular show and the show itself is ending. I love how they slowly deteriorate the animation, which is cool because, you know, it kind of reminds me of the Futurama finale, the second one, in which the series ends with Farnsworth inviting Fry and Leela to redo everything over, which only encourages the viewer to rewatch the series. And the action in the finale is really good too. I'm like, usually on the show, it's always on point, and the way that they call back to the first episode I think is really clever, and Pop's death is a really emotional moment. It didn't feel like a cheap tactic to make the episode memorable. And rewatching the series, I did know that he died in the end, and, you know, mainly because the scene of his death popped up in my YouTube recommendations a couple days after the finale aired. But witnessing it for the first time with full context, like I said, I think is really sad. And it's a real death, it doesn't pussy out either, which isn't too surprising considering regular show is much more adult than more kid shows. I mean, like, hell, you could literally say, you know who else likes regular show? And you wouldn't be joking. But I'm glad the death was real, and the ending scene afterward is just fucking amazing. It's really cliche, but if you think about it, regular show is a specific time about mainly Mordecai and Rigby's life. So it makes sense, like, that normal people, they move on with their lives. To be honest, this cliche as fuck ending was probably the best option for the show to go out on. I love how they have Mordecai hook up with some random nobody that we never even get a line of dialogue from. Like, that's good development. It shows that he's just moved on from this part of his life, since he's no longer with Margaret or CJ. And I do know there's a comic series that picks up after the finale, which I haven't read, but people really seem to like, so that's pretty cool. Indeed. So yeah, the last season I have my issues with, but I think was a really good conclusion. And honestly, even if the show did have its weak points, I still think it was great the entire way through. And now, given that you made it far into the video, I assume you've seen the entire series. But even though I just spoiled everything, like I said, if you've only seen a fraction of the show and you like that fraction that you saw, go watch all of it.